This is Nore Havoc, and you're listening to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
This is Steve BOWTIE Bryant here. Back in the 90s, I was a pro wrestling photographer for the South, and I released what might have been one of the original sets of indie trading cards. I ran across some of these original sets. They were up in Randall Fanning's attic all this time. PG-13 rookie card, Ricky Morton, George Weingroff as the Sheik, Chris Champion, Reno Riggins, Billy Montana, Gary Valiant, the Scorpion, the Medic, Rick Reynolds, Jeff Daniels, Mephisto and Dante, Ben Jordan, Steve Neely, Marcus Woodrow, Clinton Charisma, Little Farmer John. If you'd like an opportunity to get these cards, contact me now. You can get them for only $49.99. Contact me at stevebowtiebryant at iCloud.com. Get your set now while supplies last.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome one more time to the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And as always, I've got my brother from the same father and mother, the Plastic Sheik, Jarrett Street. What's up, Sheik? How you doing today?
Not much, brother. We need to get you a nickname. I'm sick of this. I got to come up with something for you.
I'm just Jimmy the guy.
Jimmy the guy.
I'm Jimmy across the street on the Wolfie show, so I don't know. It's just a lot of words to say, and you know. I
don't know. It's something. We got to come up with something for you.
You're Jarrett down the street. Jarrett down the street, Plastic Sheik. Anyway, you've got all the names. But anyway, long story short, that's the nickname Wolfie gave me. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. Let's just say that, but whatever.
It doesn't flow great, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but
it's funny,
that's what
but
it's funny, yeah, but we'll figure that out along the line. They just got to come naturally, as
don't
they
want to force it.
Right, don't want to force it. But anyway, man, today, Sheik, we got a heck of a show, dude. I'm so stoked about this. First of all, this has been one of the guys that once I announced that this show is happening, everybody's like, oh man, I can't wait for this one. I can't wait for this one. We have got Eron Hatchett, aka Nore Havoc, on the show today, man. I'm stoked.
Yeah, and I'm sure the listeners, if you've been paying attention, you've heard him mentioned several times in past episodes, and it's going to be exciting. The guy's very talented shoot wrestler. So I mean,
shooter. Yeah,
it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, and he's a legit shooter. That's the fun part of it, man. And I just am excited to hear his story. I know he's got a lot of story to tell. And the guy started out with the Jarretts and ended up a hero killer. I mean, honestly, just had a great career. But we'll let him tell his story. Just excited to get to it today. But what else is going on in wrestling, man? What else is going on?
Well, I'm sure you've heard by now, and I'm sure all of our listeners have. CM Punk fired by AEW.
Yeah, wow.
For cause, they say.
For cause, yeah. Because he.
Is that thing with Jack Perry? I don't know who's writing that. I'm not here to take sides. I know Punk's not the. Punk can be a little prickly, and maybe Jack Perry just didn't like the way that something was handled with him. I don't know exactly how it all started, but it was over like using real glass versus fake glass or something like that.
The sugar glass, yeah.
Which you know what I want to say. One thing I want to say: no matter what you want to say, no matter if people don't like Vince McMahon, and that's fine. I don't care if you like Vince McMahon or not. I mean, I grew up a WCW guy and, all that stuff. So, Vince wasn't always my hero of wrestling, but I can't see CM Punk doing what he did to Tony Khan, potentially. I can't see him doing that to Vince McMahon.
Oh no, never would have happened if you would have. He would have been gone just like this. But the WWE has this element of keeping things under wraps, and then you find out about it 6 months later or something like that, you know, because it sneaks through the dirt sheets. But, and again, I have never been the biggest CM Punk fan. I am not what you would say a Punk guy. I am not, but I am 100% not an elite guy. I am not a being the elite. I'm not. I've never really been a big fan of the Young Bucks. You know, I appreciate Kenny Omega for what he does, but I also feel like some of his spots are a little dangerous.
I feel like Dave Meltzer has him a little overrated, though, has made him a little overrated.
I agree, because I think there's guys like AJ and Seth Rollins that are much crisper with their stuff. Yeah. And it I don't know, maybe a little safer. I know Seth Rollins went through hurting a lot of people too, but yeah, the way that I'm worried about this, and we've talked about this off the air before, but I'm a little worried that there's nobody that goes against the grain in AEW. I feel like all the big veterans are either quieter and happy to have a job, or they are so pro AEW that there's no real dissenting voice. I feel like, you know, and I don't want to say this, but you've always been kind of a guy that can see things sometimes, or help me see things sometimes from a different point of view. I don't want to call you a devil's advocate, but what I mean is like, you're like, okay, well, think about it from this perspective, that kind of thing. And I'm worried that AEW, without a Punk there, is going to lose that. And also, I do feel like if there's any time that any of these guys can do something that's safer, do that. Do not do, I mean, because you look at that, like Hook and Jack Perry, I assume, you know, I don't want to get, I mean, but I would assume they are slotted for something big in the future. And maybe they're wanting to make their name like the older guys with this less, you know, more dangerous stuff before the sugar glass. But I just feel like I cannot fault Punk for looking at it from a safer perspective, because he's on the other side of where they are now.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and he's like, man, there's no need to take unneeded risks. And now, again, maybe he didn't handle it right. I think he's probably a little hot-headed, but I got to respect him in the perspective of saying, hey, look, there's no reason to not have this be safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you're talking about people who maybe need to be the leader of the locker room. Maybe somebody like Samoa Joe is that guy. I know he's a Ring of Honor, like
right,
that champion, but I really feel like Samoa Joe could be that kind of guy. That maybe can see the other perspective and not, you know, but educate and maybe not get so hot headed with it. But if somebody wants to step to him, it's like,
yeah, that's going to be a bad choice. You know, I do enjoy Samoa Joseph. I always call him that. But anyway, I like Samoa Joe. I have enjoyed his career. I've enjoyed his matches. His matches with Kurt Angle and TNA could be put in a museum. Those were great matches.
Do you know that, he's bringing up Kurt Angle, do you know, if you want to fault Dave Meltzer's system, do you know he never has rated a Kurt Angle match a 5-star match?
That's ridiculous. Oh my gosh. I don't even know what to say to that. You know,
that just about invalidates his rating system.
It pretty much does. I mean, I've always wanted to go back in the archives to see like what, you know, he rated some of the matches that we loved as kids. You know, I've never wanted to pay for it, but you know, even back in the 90s, I was reading those like prowrestling.com websites where you could read all the dirt sheet stuff that somebody would report on. But and I've always been interested in that stuff. But, you know, I feel like, you know, so much of the AEW stuff is out there as common knowledge. A lot of the older guys, like, you know, the veterans, are assuming that this stuff is a work. But in this case, who knows what's a work and what's not. The only thing that I would believe when it's not a work sometimes is if they show up in the other company. But in this case, I don't know if he's welcome in WWE either. So, and I don't know if he's needed in WWE. You know, there's so many guys there that are kind of, you know, filling that spot. But
I don't know that he's wanted, needed, welcomed, whatever. But honestly, at this point, I could see him maybe going to give a big FU to AEW
Sure. I could see that. Yeah. I could see a lot of things in that respect. And I could also just see him going off into the sunset. But with that being said, you know, you look at guys like Jericho, Dustin Rhodes, Jerry Lynn, Dean Malenko, Sting, you know, who else are we seeing here? You know, Christopher Daniels, Christian. I mean, these guys are long tenured veterans, and none of them do I see as a dissenting voice. I just see, you know, Jeff is kind of like, probably, like I said, wishes he could be in Jericho's spot, you know, and I just see all these guys being super duper pro AEW because not only are they happy to have a job, it probably pays incredibly well. You know what I mean? They pay
pretty good. I mean,
yeah, and I mean they're kind of at that point. Maybe they're not as hot headed as Punk was, but I do hope that someone back there is being that other side voice from the others, just the devil's advocate voice, because that's what I think every promotion needs. You got to have two sides to that's what's wrong with this country and this world right now, is everybody is so split they can't figure out a way to agree. Again, you know, to me, I just would love to see somebody in that locker room being able to say, look, you're wrong in this. Let's do this the right way. And, you know, unfortunately, Tony doesn't have that respect. I don't know. I'm not there, you know, but I just feel like something, he either needs to grow some testes or he needs to have somebody that backs him up. Now, again, I feel like he has plenty of people that backs him up for his correct opinion. But, you know, even Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon used to have knockdown, drag out fights over ideas in Stone Cold, and everybody would fight their ideas because you had this alpha male Vince and you have these other alpha males that want their way, and iron sharpens iron. Is that the best way to say it? You know, and if you don't have iron, you become soft. So, you know, to me, I would love to see somebody be there. I hope, let me just say that, I hope that AEW has someone, and maybe you're right. Maybe Samoa Joe's the right one there. That's a good one. I didn't think about that.
I was thinking of John Moxley as a veteran, but man, I just can't see him being the voice of reason.
No. I mean,
he's what he is. I'm not
right.
He's got talent, but I just don't see him being the voice of, hey, don't do this. Let's be safer, because
Right. Yeah. He's not, I mean, deathmatch dude, you know, he's not the picture of, do the real glass, man. You'll learn, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean,
maybe this is where they miss Cody.
Yeah. But I also,
that's why Cody left too.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was about to say. Maybe that's why Cody's gone, but who knows, you know. But I don't know. We're not going to be able to fix this one today. I know everybody's been talking about it. You know, I'm glad you brought it up, but I don't know. Maybe we'll just leave this for another day and see how it goes. But you know, you're talking about all these guys like Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. You know, those guys are known as what they call shooters. Well, that kind of leads me into this, that we have a shooter on today, as you've already said. Man. Yeah, so my segue is shooters. And we're going to one of the shooters that I know, you know, and I'm happy that we're going to have him on, and I want to hear his story. So I tell you what, why don't we play some commercials and bring Eron Hatchett on? What do you say?
That sounds great, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be right back after these messages with Eron Hatchett.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
That's right, it's the talk of Middle Tennessee, the channel you love to hate and the channel you hate to love. It's Brian Turner from Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. And if you're looking for matches from Wolfie D to Jerry Lawler to Dusty Rhodes and the team that put a pimp before your eyes and a goatee between your thighs, Booty Call and Athena, go to lostwrestling.com. See, I made it easy for you. Brian Turner's VHS Rehab. Booyah.
All right, we are back with more from the Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling podcast. And Jared, I told him, didn't I? Didn't I tell him?
You told him.
I told him, Eron Hatchett, Nore Havoc is on the show today. When I said in the beginning that this guy's done some stuff, I was not lying. You know how I'm going to prove it? I'm going to prove it right now with the man himself. Mr. Nore Havoc, Eron Hatchett, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. Glad to have you on. Now, let me ask you this. Is this the first podcast you've ever done?
It is. Yes, sir.
Ooh, we've got a rookie here. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I still feel like a rookie too, so
we're all rookies, man. Anyway, it's good to have you on your very first podcast, and we're so appreciative that it's ours. So we always start with the man himself, Plastic Sheik, and his first question of the show kind of sets the tone. Go ahead, Jut.
All right, so this is basically just a question that's going to let us get to know you, let the audience get to know you. It's going to know your influences in wrestling.
Gotcha.
In a four or five guys, your Mount Rushmore of wrestling, who influenced you, who you liked, however it may be.
Gotcha. So for me, my Rushmore is, I got to start with Macho Man Randy Savage. I was a big Macho Man Randy Savage fan back in the day. When I got to meet him and do some interaction with him, he was as advertised. He actually talks that way. So that is definitely Randy Poffo when you see him. But he's going to be my first one on Mount Rushmore. As far as having everything that you want as a wrestler, he can wrestle. He has the charisma. He has an interview. So it's definitely him on top for my first pick, my first choice. My next one is so as a smaller guy, the under 6 footers. So Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero, man, those guys are just great, what they brought to the table, and especially Rey, because when he came along, no one was really seeing an under 6 footer that could draw you money. They just didn't see it that way. And I think he really changed the way you looked at some shorter guys and how they were. And Jerry loved shorter guys. I mean, he was a smaller guy. He wasn't a tall guy, so he loved smaller guys. But to see him go to New York and what he did there was just awesome, the way he put some of the smaller guys on the map and the way he made us look. Same with Eddie. Eddie wasn't a very tall guy. He was a big, thick guy, but he wasn't a very tall guy. And I loved his charisma. I love what he brought to the entertainment side of it. He's probably unmatched in that. And then the last one, I'm going to say Ron Simmons.
Oh,
and the reason why is, so the thing about Ron Simmons for someone like me, because until he went to WWF at the time and they gave him that gimmick that they did, you didn't see a lot of black people, a lot of black wrestlers that were just wrestlers. There was always a gimmick that came with it. But he wasn't a gimmick. He was Ron Simmons. Right. He became the first black world heavyweight champion as Ron Simmons, not as Farouk, not as, anything other than what Ron Simmons were. So that was, for people like me, that's big to see that, hey, man, we're regular. We're just like everybody else. Right. We do this. So definitely Ron Simmons is going to be my fourth one that's on my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers.
I love that. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. You got some great picks there, and I love the Ron Simmons pick. I mean, the man's a heck of an athlete. Played football at Florida State. It was he's just a mountain of a man. Eddie Guerrero. The thing I sometimes like it hurts me about Eddie Guerrero is I don't think he's got the respect he has when he was alive. He's got it more after his death. I feel
That's true. That's true.
Like more people are invested in him after he died. That 97 Halloween Havoc match with him and Rey Mysterio, that's like poetry in motion.
Well, they had a series of matches within that year that was just awesome. So man, those two guys, they were over for me.
Yeah,
great list, man.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of go off of what you were saying about black wrestlers and gimmicks, you had Kamala, you had like Bobo Brazil, who, like apparently all black wrestlers had the hardest heads in the world. So you always had the headbutt. And I mean, they couldn't all be JYD, who literally was the original John Cena in like he only needed 5 moves or less. And man could not wrestle, but I guarantee you he could sell out arenas, and that's So JYD's kind of like the exception to the rule, whereas Ron Simmons was more of like you're all around. He could talk, he could walk, he could do the stuff in the ring. He had charisma. He, other than that horrible early gimmick they gave him in the WWE, I think he pretty much had great gimmicks, and he was just Doom, man. Who doesn't love Doom, by the way?
Who doesn't love Doom? Yeah.
I mean, come on,
exactly. I'll tell you a funny story on JYD. So the first time I met him was with the Jarretts, and he saw me in the locker room, and he looks at Miss Texas, and he goes, "Is that your son?" And she's like, "No." So, and then the next time we were at it was the Municipal Auditorium in Nashville, and it was me and this guy, Jim Dotson, who used to be the head of security for WWF back in the day.
Yeah.
So Jim was actually the guy that I helped train, but it was me and him. I was a heel, he was a baby, and Yoshi Kwan, Chris Champion, was like the special guest referee.
Yeah.
We didn't have a gimmick to use. I was going to use a gimmick to try to cheat and didn't have anything. So Scary Sherry was there, and so she is just a nice person, man. I tell you, she was awesome.
One of the greatest, seriously.
Exactly. Just you meet her, man. She's just normal and inviting when you talk to her.
Yeah.
But she said, "Hey, take this and tape this up like some nuts, and it's going to look like some brass nuts. You take it out, use the gimmick."
Yeah.
So we go to do the end, and Jim Dotson's a big guy, so I go to throw a punch, and his big arm hits my arm. The gimmick flies out of my hand and goes out into the crowd. I'm like, "Oh no!" So they got the gimmick, this bait, and I'm gonna tell you what it was. It was so she had a tampon and she taped it up like an unused tampon. She taped it up to make it look like brass nuts. I'm like, somebody's gonna find this in the crowd.
Yeah, there's no weight to it. There's nothing to it.
Yeah, there's nothing to it.
And
so we got to the back, man, and Junkyard Dog, who was there, he was kind of booking. He laid into me. He was like, "Man, if you're gonna use a gimmick, make sure it's real." And I was like, "Yes, sir."
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That was always my fear as a manager, was losing the gimmick. Because, constantly I was playing Jerry Rice to the guys Joe Montana. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I was constantly catching that thing. And, brother, I was so scared. One time, I can't remember who it was, maybe Jason Nesmith, I think, chucked it to me. And he really chucked it. And I had to do like the Lambo leap and grab that thing before the chain went. Now, thankfully, it was a chain, so it wouldn't have been that bad, but of course it's still bad, but still, yeah, man, that was my biggest nightmare. Awesome. Was that me causing that to happen,
Yeah, so. Mine came true, so
that's awesome. Wow. Well, you started us off with a great story. I'm stoked about the rest of this show. So I tell you what, let's slow the roll on that and let's go all the way back to the very beginning here. So
okay.
Now, a lot of people know that are listening right now, but some of them may not. But what I want to do is I want to talk about, where were you born? Yeah, what high school did you go to? I know you were a stud in wrestling, but talk a little bit about your high school days and where you're from.
Well, I'm from Nashville. And I went to Hillsborough High School, and I was always a football and baseball guy up until my freshman year, and I dropped baseball, and I didn't add amateur wrestling until my sophomore year.
Okay.
And then the good thing was that my sophomore year, when I came out, I faced a bunch of seniors and juniors that had been doing it for a long time. So I got a lot of good experience. My junior year when I started, and I was not good my first year. And for whatever reason, my senior year, it all came together. My first year, I went 6-12. 6 wins, 12 losses.
Wow.
And then the next year, I went 27-2. So it flipped out, and it was quick, and it just, for whatever reason, the second year just clicked to me.
Yeah. Wow. So what weight class were you in?
So I went 135, and then my senior year, I went 140. So luckily, I was a guy that I never cut weight. I never had to cut weight. Sometimes I had to gain weight to get up.
Gotcha.
So I didn't have to do the bag or anything like that.
Yeah. Jared, you wrestled in high school.
I was nothing special, but I had to do one of each once. I had to cut weight and jumping jacks in the shower, sweat to death, run on the bus on the way to the other high school, and then I had to eat like 4 cheeseburgers and drink a full Gatorade one time before the game.
Man.
So I've been on both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, God bless you on having the cut weight, because that's I see guys like that. I kids like, yeah, I can't do that, man. I don't know how you guys do that. And spitting in the cup, trying to get that last little ounce off of you.
You know, and Jared, you were wrestling in the upper weights too, the heavier weights. So that even then in high school, those guys are men. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm not knocking your weight range, because those are the wiry, tough ones. You know, those are the kids you can't ever pin down because their shoulders never, stop moving. But anyway, I knew y'all had that connection there. But anyway, so obviously you turn into a wrestling star. You turn into a really talented person in that sport in high school. Did you go on to state several times, I would assume?
I went to state my senior year. I ended up getting third. And then after I graduated, because when I graduated, I was 17 and I actually signed up and went to Marine Corps. I graduated, and 3 days later, I was going to Paris Island. So I went to reserve. So I didn't go regular Marine full time.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to junior nationals. And so somebody convinced me, say, hey man, takedowns is your thing. You need to go into freestyle. I said, you know what, let's do it. And I did it, man. I won a couple of matches, and then I got to one guy, and I don't know what happened, but I've never seen anybody move that fast. He was behind me, and next thing you know, I'm counting the lights on the ceiling, and he pinned me that quick, and I go, you know what? I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I've never been picked up before. So it was like, hey man, this dude just picked me up. So yeah.
That's brutal. Yeah, that's a realization right there.
It is realization. And wrestling, you can be good, but it's usually always someone better than you. It can be humbling. That's right. And you can go undefeated for 3 years, and then you face somebody that just happens to be better than you.
That's like the MMA, man. It's UFC and all that. It's like you always see somebody that you think is the best ever, and then they get beat, It's just how it is. Yeah. But
one shot take you out.
Yeah. I never thought my man Cormier was going to lose, and then John Jones comes along, and then I started liking John Jones, and then it's how it is.
Yeah, I got you.
So when did you get to start liking professional wrestling?
Man, I had always been in professional wrestling. My grandmother, she was from Columbia, Tennessee, and we used to go there on the weekends, and she'd always have it on. She'd always have Memphis wrestling on. And then when I got to high school, a buddy of mine, he ended up being my best friend. He came to class our freshman year, and he had pictures from the fairgrounds. And I thought that was the coolest thing, because I'd never been to a live wrestling. Yeah. And so he took me down, and a friend of mine, they knew Tracy Smothers, and I went to go talk to Tracy because they had a picture. I went to go get a sign. Yeah. And if you are in wrestling and you did not meet Tracy Smothers, you have missed out on a huge opportunity. Right. For one of the greatest people you're just going to talk to. And he was just so cool. But I was hooked when I went. So the first match I went and saw, and it was Phil Hickerson against Scott Steiner. And I remember Phil Hickerson slammed Scott Steiner. I remember the ring sounded so loud. I was like, man, that had to hurt. But I was so excited to be there, and I started going to the matches to the fairgrounds and his name is James. Started going to the fairgrounds with him. He actually, when I wanted to train him, we wanted to be a tag team. It just didn't work out for him that he stayed into it. So that's how I was really into wrestling, to pro wrestling.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
It's always it's so surprising to me always how many times you hear somebody say, my grandmother. I mean, it's just it's mind blowing to me and Jimmy, because our grandmother didn't like wrestling at all. So.
No, he's not a fan at all. But our uncles did. That's thank God for that. So we got it some way. We just didn't get the natural grandmother route. But
Oh yeah.
Now, do you remember ever watching any? Shane used to tell me stories about how the Jarretts used to run in a Quonset hut in Columbia. Did you see any of those shows ever? Or was that before your time?
No, it was before my time. Before my time.
Gotcha. Well, I bring that up because the obvious next step in this one is getting into wrestling. Now, obviously, you're liking wrestling all your life, become a wrestling star in high school, go to the reserves, all that. But then what leads you getting into the actual becoming a pro wrestler?
So I got in two different ways. So I actually got the Jarrett second. I got to do there's a group out of Japan called UWF at the time, and they were what's called a work and shoot. So it was a submission wrestling group.
Was it the pancrase style of wrestling? Is that what it is?
Exactly. It was exactly that style of wrestling.
George Weingroff, that kind of thing. Anyway, I'll shut up.
No, you're good. So Gary Valiant, actually knew Gary Valiant in high school. He wrestled at Pearl Cone.
Another wrestling star, yeah.
Yeah, man. He was the only one from his school that made it to state. So that's when I met him and kind of got good friends with him, was because he would come to Hillsboro to wrestle with us. He wrestled 152, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But I saw him one day, and I asked him what he was doing. He told me he was wrestling. I was like, "Are you kidding?" He goes, "Yeah, man." He said, "Hey, there's a guy named Tom Burton. If you want to talk to him, and he can kind of get you started." So he got me hooked up with Tom Burton, and we started. Originally, we were doing shoot-style wrestling, and they brought me in to spar with Gary's brother.
Oh, Billy.
Yeah, so Billy. Yeah, so I used to spar with Billy as I was learning. So my amateur background was there, but my submission was not there. So
gotcha.
I could take Billy down, but it was not a big deal for Billy because he knew how to make me tap in a couple seconds. So Billy was good, man. I love Billy. Billy was a great guy, by the way. So I'm doing that for them, and so Tom is actually showing me things, what we call American style wrestling, which you see here, and I'm also training for submission. Well, in the meantime, a buddy of mine that I work with was the first cousin of Jarrett. Okay. And he said, "Hey, man, they got a wrestling school. Do you want to go check it out?" And he goes, "Hey, I'm going to send you down there and talk to my aunt, which is Christine Jarrett."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let me do that. So that's how I met them. So I went down and talked to Christine, and she was great. She introduced me to Jeff first and then to Mr. Jarrett. And I talked to him. He said, "Hey, once you come to the Sunday, they had the workout section was at a gym that was in Hendersonville, I do believe." Yeah. And so that's how I got started with them.
That's awesome.
The first session that I showed up, man, I had like $30-$40 on me, and you had to join the gym, and I only had enough money to join the gym. And I remember joining the gym, and I went to Jarrett and said, "Listen, Mr. Jarrett, I'm sorry, I only got enough money to join the gym. I don't have enough for this first session." And he said, "Eron, don't worry about it. Let's just get you in there, and let's see what you can do." I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
And so the first thing we did, and this is really how I got in with the Jarrett. So the first thing we did, I'm a shooter.
Yeah.
And so you take a bump, you basically take an arm drag, and I took an arm drag, and I hit the mat when I come through, and Jarrett just flips out. He's like, "Oh, that's how you do it." And he's just like, "This is what I want to see you guys do." So then the next time I have to give an arm drag. Well, my arm drag is a shoot arm drag. I wasn't doing a working arm drag. And it was against Jason, who is Jarrett's youngest son. And I gave him an arm drag and literally threw him across the ring. And I remember Jeff going, "Well, damn." So I didn't know a working arm drag. I just knew a shoot arm drag, and I threw him. And so it kind of impressed him. And at the end of the session, Jarrett said, "Hey, listen, how about if you would train Jason amateur, I'll train you pro free." I said, "Well, that sounds like a good deal." So that's how I got with it.
That's awesome. Okay. I got to hear this. Before we get to more of the Jarretts, because this story is going great, I need to hear your very best Tom Burton impersonation.
"Oh, you're right. You can't do that, man. You look trying to Hulk out like Hulk Hogan." He actually told me that one time. "Don't Hulk Hogan on me like that." Yeah. So, I don't do a real good Tom, but he has that scraggly kind of deep voice.
Gruff voice. Yeah. It's so funny. We hear all these interviews. And Jarrett, do you ever feel like it's just a puzzle with all these pieces coming together? And you hear now we're hearing your side of things. And I just feel like we heard Ben Jordan or Kroll or all these different guys, Shane Morton, all these guys. And we're all finally putting pieces together to where I feel like I'm slowly becoming a Middle Tennessee expert. So anyway, on to another subject. But long story short, you're with the Jarretts. So you're training Jason in shoot, and you're learning from them in the work. So now when it comes down to it, how did you separate the two? You talk about your arm drags a shoot, but how did you slowly learn and maybe this is too much, and if you don't want to give it all away, but whatever, how did you slowly separate the two?
Man, I tell you, it wasn't that hard. A couple of sessions I had it. And I still had the Jarrett I was working with, and I still had Tom Burton. So Tom and I actually ended up having a falling out, but the beginning was great with Tom because Tom actually took me around to get me started in outlaw shows.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, and the camp was great because we had good people that came through and taught you stuff. Tom Pritchard came through. Tom Pritchard, let me tell you. So Tom Pritchard gave me a compliment and to this day, I don't think I've ever had a compliment as good as what he said.
Okay.
And so Tom was a great trainer because at the end of the session, he would always encourage you to keep going. He's like, hey man, this is not an easy business. Right. Taking these bumps is hard. I mean, even running the ropes, you have to learn you have to get a tolerance to hitting the ropes. And so he would have a good, at the end of the session, just a pep talk. And he would talk about where he came from and his martial arts background, things like that. And I remember one time he just kind of threw in, he goes, not everybody gets it naturally like Eron. And it wasn't one of those things that made me like got a big head. It actually brought a tear to my eye. Wow. Nobody had never said anything like that to me before. So I thought, man, I still don't think I've ever had a compliment as good as when he said that.
No, because it was like right time, right place. You probably were needing that, even though it wasn't like something that, okay, I'm going to quit today, but still that small amount of encouragement from somebody like Dr. Tom, dude. I mean, seriously, that's great. So did that also, because the way I make sometimes compliments, especially out in the open, end up getting you heat. Did that get you heat with anybody else because he was calm?
It did, man. Everybody was cool in the camp. I mean, that's cool. And if you didn't hear, like Kroll, so that's why I first met Kroll, and Kroll was one of my best friends. That's why I first met Kroll. And then Glenn, of course, Kane was there at the time. Kane was great, by the way. But he was funny because he would, like, if you do something with him, he was because he's such a big guy, he would think that he's hurting you. Right. And so I remember watching this film of one of the sessions with me and Timmy with Kroll, and he's giving me a shoulder tackle, and he was so worried that he hurt me. And I'm like, man, I'm all right. But he was that type of person. But no, there was no animosity at the school or anything like that, man. I mean, everybody enjoyed being there. I think everybody enjoyed just kind of having a piece of that world. Yeah. If that makes sense, we weren't in the business, we weren't in the locker room, but having a piece of that world, just being able to take a bump and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's a star-studded class too. That sounds awesome. I love that.
So tell us about like your first, like what you call your first match, and like what promotion or whatever that was for.
So my first match was in Shelbyville, Tennessee, and it's probably my top 2 or 3 matches I've ever had. It was Chris Kearns. Oh, yeah, man, it was a great match. And I tell you one thing that Tom Burton was really the person that was, do as I say, not as I do. Mm-hmm. And he would always say, listen to the person who was the veteran. And, a lot of times back then, the veteran was the heel, the babyface was the more green guy. And that was that case. So I really just had to listen to Chris Kearns. Man, he guided me. We had a great match. I remember beforehand, he was like, hey, man, a lot of people don't want to take this leg drop. Will you take this leg drop off the top rope? I'm like, yeah, man, this sounds cool. So at the end of that match, man, I mean, it was just like I said, it was one of my top 3 matches, and it was just basically listening for the veteran guy to tell me what to do and just following his instruction. That was Chris. So it was a good match.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah. Do you by chance remember anybody else that was on the card that night? Do you remember anybody in the locker room that was around? Well,
the funny thing is, Tracy Smothers always calls me Shooter. He was there that night. Okay. And so there was somebody that knew that I was an amateur wrestler, and they wanted to try to put some hands on me, and they were just playing around. I didn't feel like playing, so sometimes you just got to take somebody down and put them in a hole. And so after that, Tracy started calling me Shooter. So I remember he was there. I think it was the first time I met Wolfie. I don't think I met Jamie yet. I met Wolfie because I don't think they had quite started PG-13 yet.
So was he still Airwolf first?
Yeah, he was Airwolf then. Yeah, he was Airwolf.
Yeah, Airwolf, skinny little kid. It's funny.
Yes.
Yeah, those pictures
jumping
crack
out of
me
rafters.
Yeah, seriously. All right, now obviously you're working in Shelbyville, which again, the outlaw promotions that existed around the Memphis Loop, but the biggest thing is you actually end up becoming a USWA wrestler. Now, talk about that.
Yeah.
What led you to the USWA? So from that moment to leading you to the USWA, how did you get there?
So while I was training, Jarrett always wanted to bring me in. It was me and another guy from Kentucky that was coming down to train, and he wanted both of us. But the problem is he wanted one to be heel, one to be babyface. So he didn't really know how to do it. So he didn't know how to bring me in yet. So I didn't come in. And matter of fact, before, I don't think he knew I was wrestling because I was going to the camp for about a month, and I had started outlaw shows. I remember going to Jeff and say, hey man, they're going to let you know I started outlaw shows. And I thought he was going to be mad. He was like excited. He's like, man, that's what you need to do. You need to do that and get some experience.
Yeah.
So that was great. But how I got with them was I went to Memphis with Wolfie and Jamie one night. And so I wasn't on the card. I drove them down there.
Is this the famous story where you make them get in the back of the truck?
This wasn't this time. It was another time. But yeah,
okay.
So I made them get in the back. They wanted to smoke weed in my truck. And I said, listen, man, you can't have that smell in my truck. I have my family here sometimes. So, my aunt, my mother's in it. So you can't. So, and it's like, January. So it's freezing outside. So I said, y'all got to make a choice. So they said, all right. So they drove back, man. They smoked. They put blankets over them, and they froze, and they come back. I pull over. They come back in. But, yeah. And Wolfie, man, Wolfie's funny. So Wolfie always tried to get me to smoke with him. I'm like, no. But he always did dip. And I was like, hey, man, can I try dip? And he's like, no, you can't handle this, man. I said, but you want me to smoke weed all the time. So, yeah.
One of them I can buy at the store. The other one I can't. Or maybe out behind the store, But
yeah, he was just like, man, no, I don't think you want this dip, man. This is a little too much for you.
That's funny.
But I rolled down with them, and I showed up. And it was someone that was supposed to have a tag match with Chris Michaels. And I can't remember who it was, but they didn't show up. And Eddie Martin said, hey, Eron, you got your gear? It's like, yeah, I got my gear. And so that was my first match in Memphis with and I want to say it was me and Chris Michaels against the Masters of Terror.
That's it. Yeah. Yep. That's it. I think I saw that. That's crazy.
That was my first night. And then that Tuesday, Jarrett called me and said, hey, you ready to get started? And then that's how that got started.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I mean, you worked some great dudes there. I mean, one of them I got to hear about because I'm a big fan of his. I think we all are in this business. Who isn't a fan of this guy? And unfortunately, he's passed now. But talk about working with Brian Christopher and just maybe your interactions with him overall.
Man, Brian is a guy you're gonna have to say Brian is Brian. So certain people in the business, I mean, once you get to, and he's cool. I mean, he's not like just starting trouble with you, but every once in a while he could be a little difficult. But Brian was cool, and I got a funny story that you probably already know about it, and you're probably going to bring it up later. But I'll probably go ahead and say it because Brian was kind of, I thought, was instrumental in this, and it's the altercation between me and PG-13.
Bring it up, brother. Bring it up. That was
next. Bring it up.
So, all right. So the way it works is, you have these spot shows Thursday and Friday. What you do on Thursday, you're going to do on Friday. And back then, the locker rooms are separated. You're not in the same locker room, and that's how it was back then.
Right.
So the finish was it was me and Wolfie in a singles match. Jamie goes to interfere. They shoot me out, double clothesline. I duck, get them double clothesline. They bail. Well, that's not what happened. They gave me a double clothesline and then they left and just took the DQ. So then I get back to the locker room and I asked Frank Morel, I said, hey, Frank, I said, what happened to the finishing? And he goes, man, Jamie said you messed it up. I was like, I didn't mess it up. So but I just kind of passed it off. So the next night we get in the ring and me and Wolfie go to start and Jamie goes, hey, don't F up the spot. And I went, what? So it just kind of put me in an atmosphere, put me in a mood.
Hot.
So then I started taking Wolfie down the amateur. After a couple of times, Wolfie's like, hey, this ain't right. It's like, you can tell, man, what are you doing? And so I remember we kind of rolled to the edge of the mat, and I see Jamie. Now, Jamie's the one I want. I just happened to be in the ring with Wolfie.
Right.
So Jamie's the one I want. And so I go out to Jamie. And man, we get into it. And we go into and it's at like at a school. So we go into the stands and we're shooting. Yeah. And I got a hold. And next thing I know, both locker rooms empty out, including Jeff and Brian.
Wow.
And so they come up to me. Yeah. And so they come up to me and Eddie Marlin goes, Eron, if I see one more shoot move out of you, you're fired. So I instantly get up and stop.
Right.
So, but me and Wolfie go back into the ring and we finish the match. So we didn't talk for a few days. And then we had another singles match the next week and we get into the ring and Wolfie goes, hey man, what do you want to do? And I go, man, just wrestle. Well, after that, we were cool. We were friends again. And so we talked about it. And he's like, man, what was up? And I said, man, I told him, I said, Jamie was being Jamie. Right. And he goes, man, we thought Jeff put you up to do some amateur stuff. And I was like, no, I thought maybe Brian had put you guys up to something. Yeah. So we both for years, and we talked about it not too long ago, we both for years thought, he thought that Jeff had put something up for me, and I thought that Brian had put them up to do something. But really, it was just me being upset with Jamie.
Yeah, and Jamie, I mean, that's just Wolfie's cross to bear right there.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say Wolfie has bared that cross many times with Jamie.
Jamie's great. Jamie's great.
Man, I'll say this about Jamie, and I love Jamie to death, and he's probably my top one best match was against Jamie. So, Jamie, when you sit down with Jamie, because Jamie is usually on 100 when he comes in.
100.
He's on 100, 110, yes. But when you sit down one-on-one with Jamie, when I say that he is smart and he is intelligent and he knows the business, he's been in it for a while, and you sit down with Jamie like that, it's a new side that you see of him. So I would say people, you see the one side of Jamie, but when you sit down one-on-one, you see how smart he is.
Totally. And he's honestly a daggone savant about this business. Yeah. But the problem is he's not only a savant about what's in the ring, he's about what's the other life too. He knows the life. If you got to think about it, he's Bill Dundee's son. He has been in the business since he came out of his mom's womb. He's probably forgot more than most people will ever know about this business. And trust me. So I'm gonna be Wolfie real quick. Okay. So hey, Eron. hey, Eron. So I'm pretty sure I figured it out, but it was Frank and Jeff. They were gassing you up in the back, right, to shoot on me because they knew I wrestled a little in high school, and that was what they were doing, right? They gassed you up and told you to shoot on me, right? That's
what he thought.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's thought. And I'm telling you, anybody who has ever come on our show, whether they have a connection to you or not, that story inadvertently comes up. I bet we've talked about it 5 or 6 times. We've done 112 episodes, and I guarantee it's come up at least 10 times.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And he'll bring it up, whether from Frank's perspective or Jeff's perspective, and he has kept that in his brain that they basically gassed you up. Now, you explaining the whole story, it makes much more sense. But with that being said, I mean, he's told me stories like y'all ended up in the crowd. Jamie's whacking you in the back of the head with the hubcap. Do you remember any of that?
No, the hubcap never came in the play. No.
Yeah. Okay. So you would have remembered that too. Yeah.
No.
Anyway, so no Frank, no Jeff gassing you up. It was literally something like you just couldn't replace Wolfie with
saying that. Yeah. It was literally Jamie saying that. So it was it was me hearing that and it triggered me, I would say.
Yeah, that's a legendary story.
I didn't mess the spot up. That wasn't the finish. You didn't do the finish. You didn't shoot me off the rope. So
Right. They took the DQ and really put you in a bad mood. So let's just go with that. Yeah.
No, well, I would have to say one thing on Wolfie's impersonation is you got to call me Rerun because they always call me Rerun.
Okay, Rerun. Yeah, sorry. Hey, Rerun. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. All right. I like that Rerun, man. Wow. Okay. Is that from the show? That's happening?
That's from What's Happening because that's what Jamie would call me all the time.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah, well, better that than a lot of other things. But
anyway. Jamie.
We'll get with Jamian. Yeah, that's a new statement right there. You know how like Ric Flair says he's nachin when he's out partying and stuff?
Yeah.
I think Jamian is also a whole other.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily. It can be partying, but it can be also other stuff. So anyway. Yeah.
So you're right. I see two names: Lex Luger and the Big Boss Man. Tell me something about them.
So with USWA, and it was at a great time that I went when I was with them, because they had to deal with WWF and they were sending guys down. And so being in the locker room, man, it's kind of, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but you see people that you didn't think you would meet this early on in doing what you're doing. So the Big Boss Man, I sat right next to him in the locker room, and he had been off for a while. I think he had an injury. And he was just coming back, and he said, hey, he was doing this before he went back on the main road, and he was trying to make sure I had it back. And I was nobody. And he looks at me and he goes, hey, man, you mind watching my match? Tell me what you think. And so it was like, dude, are you serious? Like, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
And so I watched this match, and we came back and we talked about it like, man, you had missed a step. And he talked to me the entire night. And he was just like a normal person, man. You wouldn't think of that. You wouldn't think that he would even talk to you. But he was just a normal guy, man. And it was awesome to just sit there and just, I mean, we didn't even talk that much about wrestling. It was just about other stuff, football, and kind of told me, him getting into it and into the business. And yeah, man, it was great. Lex Luger, on the other hand. We sat next to each other. Now, I will say the cool thing was neither one of them had their own locker room. They had their own locker room. We were in the big locker room with everybody. Usually it was the two of them, I do believe, and you kind of went to one or the other, and the women had one. And he literally sat right next to me. And I think the only thing he asked me, because he saw I use tape, which funny is I use prefab, and Danny Davis used to get on to me. He's like, man, you're a shooter. Why are you using prefab? Just tape your hand up.
Right.
So Lex Luger was like, hey, man, can I get some of the tape? And I gave him some tape. He didn't say thank you. He didn't acknowledge. And we sat there, man, for hours, and he never talked to me. But I did notice one thing. He wasn't as big physically as I thought he was going to be. He was just really cut up. Mm-hmm. So I guess it depends on, what time I was seeing him, but he wasn't as large as I thought he was going to be when I first saw him. But yeah, night and day when I met those two.
Yeah.
I've always thought the Big Boss Man seemed like he would be like, he was just a nice guy. And I've also heard that Lex Luger, even from his mouth, that he wasn't like a people person.
No, he wasn't. I mean, he let me know that he was, without saying it, that he was like Luger and I was nobody. Whereas, Big Boss Man was much more of a real person.
Right. He was Ray Traylor. He just had that.
He was Ray Traylor. Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this. What year was this? Was this around like 94?
So, this was 93. This was 93. Around 93 or so.
Yeah.
Because when I first started with the Jarretts, they didn't know what to do. And so the whole thing with the camp was, it started, I think, originally as really just a money grab for Jeff to make extra money. He was mostly doing the camp, and I think it kind of morphed that they wanted to say, hey, we can show some guys from the camp to get other people in.
Gotcha.
So they weren't really sure what to do with me yet. And they didn't do much until one night when Billy Travis didn't show up.
Yeah.
Which he was known to do. We were in Arkansas, and I remember I had to wrestle 3 times. It was me and Wolfie in the singles. It was me and Miss Texas in a mixed tag. And then when Billy didn't show up, and he was working, they were working. Let's see, it was Jeff Jarrett and Billy Travis and Angle with Rex King and Steve Dog. And so we had Papa Shango there that night from WWF.
Soul Taker. Said, okay, oh, yeah.
Yeah, Soul Taker, yeah. So they said, hey, won't you put him in place of Billy Travis? And he goes, hey, won't you let the kid do it? And he pointed to me, and it kind of made me mad because, one, I had worked twice. But 2, he called me a kid, and it kind of irritated me. But I think that kind of got me in. So, because we ended up having a tag match with those two, and it went pretty well. So that's when they started to do a little bit more with me. But yeah, this was around 93, maybe mid 93.
Okay, because I was thinking, you were talking about Luger kind of not being as big, but he was definitely cut up. I was wondering if this was maybe around the steroid trial, but I think that was like summer of 94, if I'm not mistaken. So,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wondered if he just sized down a little bit, but also I do remember him going through that phase of really being more cut up than large.
Well, when did he have that bad wreck? He had a bad wreck too.
I'm not 100% on that. Jared, you're the Jamie. You're the Rogan Jamie of this show. So anyway, you brought him up earlier, and I got to bring this back up because I was always enthralled by this guy. When I would watch Monday Night Raw, I would see this guy in the crowd as a security guard, and he looked like daggone Road Warrior Animal with a backwards Kangol cap and a fanny pack, and he always had that black, like, what they call it now, but it's like a compression type shirt on. And talk about now, was this similar to around that time, or was this a little before, a little after working with Jim Dotson?
So Jim Dotson actually came through the camp. Jim Dotson was good friends with Mark, The Undertaker, with the Harris brothers, Primetime Brian Lee. They were all really good friends.
Yeah.
And so they came through he came through the camp. Actually came there a day I wasn't there, and I think the Harris boys did the camp themselves. So the next week I ended up meeting Jim, and I remember telling the Jarrett, I said, "Hey, this is a pretty big guy, and I want to take him out and he needs some experience. He can take the bumps. He just needs some psychology."
Right.
And so I actually started taking him out, and I met him, and I started bouncing for him. There used to be a club downtown Nashville called Bulls. Yeah. And that's where I met Brian Lee. And so the first night I went down there, he said, "Hey, man, you want to come down?" And I said, "Yeah, let me come down." And it was like an upscale restaurant up top, and there was a bar below. And I remember walking in, and I see him, and he is literally dragging a guy by the foot. And right behind him is Brian Lee with two guys, one under each arm, and they're taking these guys out. And they take them outside. And I'm like, what in the world? And the first thing Jim goes is, "Hey, man, you want a job? You're not wrestling?" I'm like, man, this is like a Roadhouse. Let me think about it. But I ended up working for him, and Jim Dotson was great. He actually introduced me to the Undertaker. Undertaker had a birthday. He was in town, and him, Jim, some guys got a limo one night. And so Jim goes, "Hey, man, you want to meet Mark?" So I go out to meet Mark. So, "Hey, how you doing?" It was real quick. And so I look inside, and they're in this limo, and it's like three of them, and there's a bunch of girls. And I went, I must be on the B squad. So I go back to work, and probably 6 months later, Mark is back in town. Now, I don't think he even knows my name. And he's there, and it's like late Sunday, and he's there, and I walk back because Jim had told me Mark was there. And so I walked past him, and he goes, "Eron, you still on the B team?" And I was like, he knows my name.
That's all. Yeah.
No, that was pretty cool. But he was good friends with them. So I ended up taking him to the Jarrett's and got him started. I think his first match was against Spellbinder.
Okay.
It wasn't a great match.
I'm sure it wasn't.
Deal. And of course he and the Harris boys were good friends, and he ended up doing the gimmick where he was their cousin. He was Chris Harris, he was Jim Harris. Yeah. And so they kind of did that deal. But yeah, man, Jim Dotson, he's passed away. He was a really close friend of mine, and he and I was on the road a lot. So
man, and he was on TV more than anybody, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, he was consistently on TV
every week.
Yeah, he was the Doug Dillinger of the WWF. That was a crazy gimmick to have there. I didn't also know that he was a wrestler, but it made total sense by the way that he looked. I mean, he looked like a diesel truck,
They actually brought him up. So he did a deal with USWA, and he was the cousin of the Harris twins. They brought him up to WBE or WBF at the time. It was mainly because of Mark. Sometimes it's who you know. But they didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't quite ready yet wrestling. And I think Mark was the one that came up with the gimmick for him to do security. So he became that on air, which he became the personal security for Mark and Stone Cold and The Rock whenever they would do certain events.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Okay. Well, we've kind of reached a point in the career of Eron Hatchett that you took a little break. And
yes.
we're gonna call it a break, and that's essentially what it was. I do have a question about this break, okay? And not trying to be out of place here, but let me just ask you a question about the break here. So during this break, had you been available, do you think you would have been in WCW or WWE?
Well, I'm gonna say this. So if the best compliment I've had was from Tom Pritchard. I think the second best was from Jerry Jarrett. And he said if he was 6 feet tall, he'd be a millionaire right now.
Okay.
So it was things that, and luckily, man, I will say this with USWA, you meet a lot of people, and my time was great. And I don't remember bad time. I don't remember anybody ever having like just ego issues. So, I mean, even from Brian Lee saying, hey, man, they're doing this thing in Knoxville. Maybe I can bring you onto there. So there was opportunities for me if I was more patient.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask, the reason I ask is because 6 foot became not a big deal in a couple of years.
Exactly.
In like 3 or 4 years, 6 foot was not as big of a deal. You know, I always say this, and I'll tell Wolfie says it too, but I'll tell Wolfie and all of them about the time. PG-13 was about a year too early, and I feel like had they been there a year later, I feel like it would have been a different scenario for them. Now, granted, they had that nation domination run. Nothing wrong with that. Good for them. They got, opportunities and all that with ECW, WCW and all that. But the reason being I'm asking that question is because, like I said, you were on the break. And because of that, I just feel like I could have easily seen you at least having a run in WCW, because I feel like there was enough guys there that you could have easily, it wasn't necessarily the land of the giants there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've just got a crazy feeling that I could have seen you doing something there, because guys like Dean Malenko, now I'm not, Eron, please, I'm not in any way saying you're not like Dean Malenko, but I'm also not putting you in that same. But you know what I'm saying? But I know you were highly athletic. You were very trained in the shooting ability. Plus, you also knew how to work. I just would almost question whether or not you might have had. And knowing Jeff, the Harris twins, I mean, I almost feel like there would have been a spot there for you had that happened. So I don't know. That's just a hypothetical. Who knows? We may not ever have that answer, but when it comes down to it, I just wondered if you felt like there would have been an opportunity there. So,
yeah, I mean, you hope so. You never know. It's and a lot of things I think I did back then ended up being more popular. I think because in the early '90s, it was not popular to wear kick pads. I was one that did that. I took a lot of heat from it, especially from like Buddy Wayne. Oh, Buddy Wayne would just get on me all the time.
I bet.
And so now things are, everyone's wearing kick pads now.
Yeah.
And it's not that I started thinking, other guys were way better than me that started doing it, got more attention for it. But I think that look would have gotten over more. So yeah, it's one of those. I think because I enjoy my life now with my wife and my 2 girls that I don't look back,
question it,
question it. So yeah.
And that's a great place to be, brother. And I think I would say 99% of the pro wrestlers from your era, if they could say, I would say that they called what you would say you won. You know what I mean? You got the wife, you got the happy life, you got the kids, you got the stable life. You're not out there signing autographs to pay your bills now. You know what I mean? You're not. Exactly. You're not broken down. I mean, you may be hurting, maybe not, but you're probably not hurting as bad. And there's a lot of upside to that. Now, again, when it comes down to it, it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda type scenario. I just thought I wanted to ask you that because all these names you're dropping about how you were rubbing shoulders with all these guys, it just dawned on me that I felt like, that might have been something that could have happened there.
Join me, Gene Jackson, for the Jackson Interaction Podcast, where I'll be doing one-on-one interviews with people from the world of professional wrestling, as well as stand-up comedy. You can get them anywhere podcasts are available in both video and audio form, but you can find them all at GeneJacksonPod.com.
If you're a fan of rock and music, I'd really appreciate it if you took a moment to check out my podcast. It's called the Decibel Geek Podcast. We've been doing it for about 10 years now. We talk about Kiss. We talk about Ozzy. We talk about Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses and Metallica. We talk about all the legends from the 60s and on, up to brand new bands that you should be hearing about today that you're not going to hear on the radio. It's Decibel Geek. Wherever you find your podcasts, you'll find us there. If you love rock and roll, I can almost guarantee you're going to love my show.
Okay. Well, coming out of that, and you end up making a return to professional wrestling, and something comes up that a letter changes. It's still the USW, but an A turns into another vowel into an O. Now, talk about your getting introduced to wrestling again and Tony Falk.
Well, so Tony actually helped train me with the Jarrett.
Right.
So,
a lot of cases, if they weren't there, he would be there, right?
He would be there. So Tony actually helped train me. And again, I told you, Kroll was there. He got started me. And so Kroll was one of the first people I reached out to. Wolfie was probably, because I'd always been in touch with Wolfie. I'd been in touch with Wolfie, but Kroll was the first one to say, hey, man, I'm back. I'm thinking about doing some things. And he was excited for me to be back. In fact, people don't know that Kroll was actually the best man at my wedding. My wife and I had went downtown Nashville, got married, and we've been married for 20 years now. But it was like, man, I wanted him there. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So
that's awesome.
He was my best man at my wedding. So
that's cool.
I called Kroll and said, hey, man, I'm ready to get started. And so we started in Springfield when I came back and got started with that.
So, killer name here, Nore Havoc. How did you come up with that, and how was the idea for the whole thing?
So I was always a baby face. Eron Hatchett was always baby face, and you got to change it up sometimes. And so I came to Carl and I said, listen, this is what I like to do. I said, we're going to bring this guy in. His name is Nore. He's gonna mess some things up. And so for a month or so, we teased Nore. He's sending these guys out. And so finally we get in the ring. They're jumping on Tony Falk, and Eron Hatchett comes in to make the save. And he said he's tired of this Nore guy.
Can you tell us like he said it though? Can you say it like Tony would say it?
I can't do Tony, man. Kroll does a great Tony. I can't do Tony. All that I can say is Tony is, Tony Falk from Paducah, Kentucky. But I can't really do that. I can't do it justice like Kroll can.
That's a shoot.
But he gets in the ring and he goes, man, I'm tired of hearing about this Nore. And he starts to think, he goes, Nore. That's Eron backwards. And then I hit him with the diamond cutter, and that's when Nore was born. So then they figured out, okay, that's Nore turned from baby to heel, and it's just basically Eron backwards.
And that was a trip because I knew you as Nore. That's when I met you. I got in the business out there, and it was Nore Havoc, and that's how I knew you. And Shane, Kroll, and all these guys are calling you Eron, and it's so I'm like, hold on, are they just flipping his name around? And then, of course, I learned more about you, and I realized, okay, this dude had a whole career before I ever met him. So when it comes down to it, Eron backwards, Nore, you're the baby face, now you're the heel. I love it. Yeah. Did you have like a specific idea for like you're going to be just this ultra violent killer basically?
It was going to be, the big thing was, and it's always been, hey, we hate Tony Falk and all the Falks, and we just want to have all the power. So it's always been, hey, we want the power, that we control everything. It was and I always make this joke. So I always say, the house that Nore built. So, and I've been in places with AJ Styles, and I say, I think AJ Styles stole my gimmick, man. The house that AJ built was, and I've done this for years, and I think he stole it. We're just like, probably didn't.
Yeah.
Everyone says that. Everyone says that. But it was just a thing of being against everything, with Tony Falk, and then, it actually came on to LT, because, LT's first match, I had his first match, which was great. It was always just being against the Falks, and that's how Nore came about, and that's his big thing, was that he wanted to have all the power. The funny thing is, so if I go somewhere and they put a belt on me, I would hate it, and I would tell Kroll, hey, man, I don't want the belt on me because you guys want me to stay late, and I want to get in and get out. So I just want to leave early, man. I don't want to be last. I want to give me like mid if you can, and let me get out of here.
Amen. Yeah, you're family man. You got a life. You know,
I got
a life in a life.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very cool, man. So, you know, talking about having all the power and you wanted to take over and get rid of Tony Falk and the whole family and stuff. You were doing that with, honestly, in my personal opinion, one of the most underrated legends that I've ever been on a show with. And, you know, you were working with Devon Day too, but at the same time, you were the man, Tim Renesto, in the Hero Killers. Talk about putting that together and talk about working with Tim. Now, Tim is an old schooler too, Speedy Talltree. I mean, he's been around forever. Memphis, you know, well-known family in the Memphis area, you know, the Assassins, I mean, everything. But just talk about getting with Tim and forming that crew.
So when I originally started, and I told, and Crow was like, "Hey, who do you want with you?" Actually, and I always called him the number one draft choice, which was Devon Day. Man, I got to have Devon Day. When I first came back, he was the first match I had, and I thought it was great. And I was like, I want Devon. And then I was like, man, Tim Renesto. I mean, to me, Tim Renesto was way better than me in getting heat and just what he did. And so I was like, I got to have Tim with me. And then we had some guys like Slacker J that was with us. We had some other guys that kind of came in and went, but mainly it was the core of the Hero Killers was me and Devon and Tim.
Yeah,
Tim was definitely, man. If I needed to go to somebody with some idea how to do a finish, it was Tim that I would go to, and he would give me some advice. And when Devon passed, and Tim and I started tagging together. The funny thing is, I was always jealous of Tim Renesto because he did things in the ring that I didn't think to do.
Yeah.
So it's just, man, when you get into a ring with somebody like that, and you just tell that he's so much better than you as far as psychology and what he's doing and things like that. You just need to be around people like that.
Yeah, well, you know, his dad, come on. I mean, you know, so Jarrett, you always hear about, you know, Nick Patrick's dad, Jody Hamilton, right? He's a WCW legend. Everybody talks about him. And he was in the tag team, the Assassins. Well, the other guy, the real two Assassins were Jody Hamilton and Tom Renesto. And if you think about it, those are the killers of the OG days. You know, those were the guys that the tag teams that we loved, they feared that tag team. You know what I mean? And so Tim obviously is going to get that. Tim is like the last person I would have ever messed with because he just had this air about him, not necessarily like, I will kill you. It's more like I could kill you. You know what I mean?
Man,
does that make any sense?
He's had some points where he has definitely he's had to shoot on some people. So
Anthony Wayne.
Yeah, and I love Anthony Wayne. Anthony Wayne's cool.
Right.
I love him as a referee. He's great. But and one night Tim he came in and he told me, man, we were having like a little meeting before, and he said, man, I'm tipping in the red. I was like, hey man, you want to just kind of stay in the corner and chill out? And he was like, he always called me Nore. He rarely did he call me Eron, but he's like, Nore, man, I'm tipping in the red. So he had a night that night, man. I think the funny part is, so we were doing tapings and I'm on the microphone and you can't see me. You hear my voice and I'm saying, hey, I told my guys to do this, and he was tearing this kid up, and I had to look at Devon. And I'm on the mic, and I'm saying I gave them full permission to whoop these guys, and I'm giving Devon a sign, hey, tag him out. Tag him out now before he killed this kid. So, I mean, Tim has that in him that he can definitely he can do some stuff.
Man, well, so I'm going to set up the scenario, and I have nothing against Anthony Wayne, even though he's blocked me on Facebook, but I have nothing against him. I think he's a great referee with a great mind for the business. But with that being said, I've seen the video, the clip, okay? And if I'm going to set this up, Tim's bouncing around. I know Shane Morton's in there. He's got that long hair, and Tim and they're all kind of brawling around. And then for somehow, Tim sails on his back, and all of a sudden, here comes a young, sprightly Anthony Wayne rolling in the ring with a chair, and he's looking like he's going to drive the chair down on his neck and do that little like spot to where he's like choking Tim with the chair. Well, Tim is having zero of it. He jumps immediately up and is laying into him. And what's funny is like at first they're kind of, Shane's like jumping on him a little bit. Somebody else is jumping on him. And long story short, Tim fires back. He's not selling anything anybody else is doing. beating the crap out of Anthony Wayne and might have had him in a chokehold, I think. Anyway, all I hear is Kroll saying, hey, somebody get, I can't do it, get Kroll, but hey, somebody get Tim. He's going crazy in there. It's just like, because Kroll always had that ability to kind of control things. So,
the funny part was the no-sell. I mean, because when he puts the chair down on him, Tim immediately bounces up.
Like a shot,
Yeah. So he immediately bounces up, and Crow's like, get Timmy. So I actually go to Timmy, and he's not letting go. And I whispered in his ear because I think at this point, if someone tries to get him off of him, he's going to swing on him.
Right.
So I go up to him and I grab him and I say, "Hey, Tim, it's Eron. That's good. That's done." So eventually he lets him go. Because I think if it was anybody else, he probably would have swung on whoever tried to break it up. But
and you could see Shane keeping his distance behind him. Yeah, and it's funny because Shane has got that long hair, and he's punching, and he'll push that hair back and punch and push the hair back. He's really working that hair gimmick, which is fine. He had a great head of hair, not knocking that. But it's funny. He's like standing back, and he's like, you can see the wheels working in Shane's head. Is like, is he really beating the crap out of him, or is he working right now? And then he starts to see that he is, and he goes up on him. He's like, and then he backs back off. It's funny. The video is great. It's out there. I'm not telling you who gave it to me. I'm not naming any names, but when it comes down to it, that is a crazy video, and I'm glad I saw it because, man,
that's hilarious. Yeah, it was a night, man. That whole night was very weird. And just to kind of bring up another night we had that was funny, I started to tell you this when Nore came about. The funny story about this was, so I got so much heat one time that, when you're building for an angle or something like that, and you're doing a promo, you need people to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they hated Nore so much. I'm talking on the mic and you can't hear it because everyone's booing. And this is around Christmas time. And I said, listen, y'all need to shut up. No one stops. I said, listen, if y'all don't shut up, I'm going to tell your kids a secret about Santa Claus.
Oh,
and
Lord.
It just sends the people into the atmosphere. And so the funny part was, me and my wife, when we left that night, so we got in the car and she looks at me, she goes, "You went too far tonight." So I said, I don't do that no more. So I always tell everybody that story, man. But yeah, she's like, yeah, you went too far. That was it.
Thank you, honey. I appreciate you telling me that. Yeah, I'm glad to know, because that's what we need in our life sometimes. You know what I mean? Is that person.
You have to know sometimes that's it. Don't cross that line.
For sure. Yeah. So, okay, you end up, you're a holder of the TV title, of the heavyweight title. I mean, you hold it several times. Now, and then you actually end up meeting up with this guy again. Now, he's in a new gimmick as Slash, but you're now working Wolfie D once again. So now you'd worked Wolfie D so many times back in the day, Eron and Wolfie. Now it's Nore and Slash. Talk a little bit about that, because I would love to hear if there was any difference at that point, since you had worked I'm
going to tell you this. Here was a good thing about working with him. Once we knew each other, so it was really easy. I tell you, Wolfie actually gave me some advice on being a heel. Was probably the best advice I ever heard. So Eron Hatchett was the guy that did moonsaults and flips and a lot of spots and things like that. Right. And so when I was heel, I put a lot of that into it. And he said, "Hey man, you're not going to get your heat doing these flips." He's like, "You need to be mean. You need to snarl, and you need to mess with the crowd. And you're not getting your heat the regular way that you think you're going to get it, the way you get over as a babyface." And I remember he gave me the best advice when we started kind of doing that angle. It's like, "Hey, listen, you need to be mean.
Yeah.
All the flips, tone the flips down and be mean." And he was absolutely right. And I got more heat when I started doing that.
Yeah,
we had a good little angle, but I will say this, and I tell him this every time I talk to him. I hate that move he does, the whirly bird thing.
Oh yeah,
it is the most god awful move in all of wrestling. It should be banned. Yes, it should be banned, because you stay in the air for like 2 seconds and you're spinning around. And I told him, I said, "Man, I don't want to take that move again." But yeah, I tell him, man, it's the worst move in all of wrestling, in the history of wrestling.
Yeah. What's interesting to me there is you're saying this because you're kind of so like, what advice are you getting from somebody like a Tim Renesto versus someone like a Wolfie D? Did you see any difference, or were you even getting much advice from Tim? Was it more on the job training with Tim? What do you?
I think when I first got with Tim, I wouldn't say he didn't know how to kind of like, hey, do I give him advice? Do I not give him advice? And then I would ask Tim. So Tim would assume that I always knew, what I need to do in certain situations. And I would ask him. And so then he got to the point he was more comfortable. Hey, Nore, what do you think about doing this? Yeah. But he never put it out like, hey, man, this is what you need to do. He was like, hey, what do you think about this? Give me your opinion on this. And then that's how you get their advice.
Okay,
Which is a little bit more direct that, hey, man, won't you do this? And he's not being mean. He's just like, hey, it makes more sense if you do this as a heel, as a baby face in that regards.
Yeah, because I mean, I could see both men having a big impact on it, especially as far as your respect of carrying a lot of weight. It's like, okay, these two guys, I would listen to whatever they have to say and that kind of stuff. Because honestly, two of the brighter stars as far as knowing what they're doing in that whole scene were those two guys. You know what I mean? So
I have to bring up one Wolfie D story that.
Please.
So Wolfie actually brought me down to Alabama to work for not Pat Tanaka, Paul Diamond.
Okay.
And so Wolfie gets color one night, and it won't stop bleeding. We're down below, and it's like a locker room down below. And so it won't stop bleeding. Someone says, hey, I have some super glue. Let's super glue it. So they super glue it, and they put a Band-Aid on it. Well, like 10 minutes later, Wolfie's like, hey, man, I think I got a knot on my head. And I said, yeah, I could feel it through the Band-Aid. Let me take it off and let me kind of take a look at it. When I pull it, it pulls the rips, the cut, and literally blood shoots out his head like a scary movie. Now, it's a locker room full of all these big old tough guys, and everybody goes, oh, and they like squinch up like their fist too close to the body because it's literally blood shooting out his head. And Wolfie goes, man, what is it? What's wrong? Right there. We need to towel like now. And it got kind of scary because he kept bleeding. I was like, man, we're going to have to take him to the hospital. But Wolf's like, nah, I'm be all right. I don't want to go to the hospital. But it was scary, man. It was a little scary. But yeah, when I pulled that Band-Aid off, and it literally shot blood out like a scary movie.
That sounds like Tom and Jerry where they like step on a garden hose and it keeps building up. And so I guess the blood was just pooling under that glue. It sounds like.
Exactly.
Wow. Man, I love locker room doctors, man. Some of the best you can ever find. I know there's guys that can fix your neck. I know there's guys that can cut and not cut. And there's guys that can fix wounds too. But man, that's interesting. Lee, I can just see it because it's like almost like what you would say, a horror movie where it's squirting.
It was, man.
Wow.
Just go to the doctor. Doctor take care of it.
Yeah, everything will be good. Yeah. Anyway, just like Ben Jordan said on the last show, Eddie Gilbert told him he was the smartest man in the world, and Jarrett said, hey kid, you got insurance? And he's like, I sure do, because he had a real job, and that real job gave him insurance, so
Eddie Gilbert, I tell you, Eddie Gilbert, he was because he was with USWA at the time, and he would the first time he talked to me, it was a Monday, so we did TV on that Saturday, and then Mondays we'd be in Memphis. And so he said, hey, man, I got to tell you something funny. I said, what's up? He goes, man, my mom saw your name advertised for Monday. Of course, they called me Aaron. And she goes, hey, who is this Eron Hatchett? We've got Hatchett in our family. I wonder if we're related. And he goes, no, I don't think we're related. So whenever I saw Eddie, he would bring that up. That was a story that he would always bring up.
That's hilarious. Hot stuff, Eron Hatchett. I like it.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a gimmick there, but
missed out on it. Man.
So talk to us a little bit about working Jerry Lynn and Chuck Taylor.
So, man, I tell you, the good thing about people like Jerry Lynn is you learn things that you thought you knew that you didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was always a person. He would say this, hey, let's work on our foot placement. And so that means when you go over a match nowadays, they can be so complicated, and you think that a guy knows what you mean, but you don't, and you're in the wrong spot when you don't need to be. And he would always say, hey, all right, let's work on our foot placement of where we're going to be, especially if you got a complicated spot or if you got more than one person, because you can sit there and you can go over things and it doesn't make sense until you physically go through it. And you see guys that go through a routine, but he wants to say, okay, where are we actually going to be in the ring when we do this? We're doing this right here, but we need to know where we're going to be in relationship to the ropes. If there's a camera, where we're going to be in relationship to the camera. And so that's one of the things that Jerry Lynn kind of taught me. Chuck Taylor was just like this little kid, man. Him and Ricochet both were with USWA, and they were just little kids. I think they were just, at that point in their careers, they were just happy to be in the business. They were two cool kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I've heard people have a little bit of heat with Chuck, and I'm not 100% sure on the full story on that, but some people loved Ricochet and some people did not like Chuck Taylor. Let's just say that. So I don't know.
He was a little bit more, I don't know how to put it. Ricochet was more personable and he was just a kid, and Chuck was more, like I remember one time he did this photo shoot with Lindsay Lohan. He came back and the way he told the story is like, I'm Chuck, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I mean, I didn't have any problems with him.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. It's funny. They're both working AEW now. So maybe Eron would have ended up in AEW. Maybe, who knows? Right.
Well, Ricochet, he's with WWE.
Right.
So
right. I meant Jerry Lynn. I'm so
Chuck
sorry.
Taylor being
Jerry
with
Lynn.
AEW.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, my whole point on that is that I'm still thinking you would have been somewhere. So we're good. Anyway, so working with, the USWO, obviously that's the, in my opinion, one of the premier, if you weren't working for Bert, and, I didn't see a lot of Bert in your history there, but, if you weren't working for Bert, you wanted to be working for Tony as far as, in Nashville.
Well, I actually did work for Bert a little bit. He would call me and say, hey, man, I'm in a pinch. Can you come help me out a little bit? And I'll say this, I've had good relationship with, I don't think I've had a bad relationship with any booker or promoter. And I wouldn't say anything different with being with Bert. Bert paid me well. If I had to come in and stand in for something that he needed. I remember one time we was going to, I want to say Indiana, and it was me and Bully Douglas against Chris Harris and James Storm, and say, hey, man, can you help me out? I was like, yeah, man, I'm here. Let's do it.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. I never had any issues with Bert. Bert was always great with me. I can't say anything bad about any promoter. They've never treated me bad.
That's cool. Well, the whole point of that little statement I made, and I'm glad you filled that in there, actually, because that's a good question. I didn't even think I needed to ask, and I'm glad I did. But leading into working in Millersville at Saw, and personally, I think the world of Tony Falk. When it comes down to it, though, my favorite guy I ever worked for as a whole is TJ Weatherby. And working at Millersville at Saw, you started even straight into like a TV title angle with a guy named Damian Adams, and you worked a long feud with him. Now, talk a little bit about going out to Millersville and working out there with those guys.
I like Millersville. I like the setting of it. I like the way it was set up as far as the production value. You can tell that Kroll really wanted to do so, and TJ. And TJ was great, by the way, if anybody that hadn't had any time with TJ. But I love the way it was set up. It was a
little sweat box, but it was awesome.
It was. It could be a little sweat box, especially in the back.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's kind of cramped in the back, but as far as doing a TV platform, it had a good little setup there. So I enjoyed my time going to Millersville. I really like Millersville, and mainly because you got to like the people you're around. I liked everybody that I was around.
Yeah, it was a great crew, and like I said, I loved working for TJ. I came in working for Porter, though, so it was all up after that. I always joke, and not knocking Porter as a whole. He gave me my chance, but I think Porter thought we were working USWA TV and nobody had to get paid. But anyway, we'll get off of that and go on to something else. But anyway, working at Saw, I always had a blast out there. TJ gave me a lot of opportunities and actually paid me to do it, which was surprising, Yeah. And just a good guy. And it was always such a good little crowd that it was kind of like a little mini Columbia out there. You know what I mean? Columbia, I think, is one of the last towns in the world that'll believe in pro wrestling and I don't mean it in the like classic sense. I mean, they believe that it is great thing. And, you know, I loved when I had a chance to work in Columbia. It was so easy being a heel manager. It was so easy just getting heat there. But when it came down to it, you know, Saw as well was so easy to get heat out there. They just hated you from the rip. If they didn't like the cut of your jib as you walked down the aisle, they would boo anybody. But anyway.
All right, talk to us about working a heavyweight title feud against former guest of the show, Jeff Daniels.
Man, Jeff is cool. I knew Jeff from back in the USWA days, and when I saw him, I hadn't seen him for a while. And so I remember the first thing he goes like, "Hey man, I got this spot I want to do. I think you're the only one who could do it. We need to do this spot." And it was basically us doing a double crossbody, but we both are literally horizontal and we push off each other. Yeah. And we had we had fun with our little angle. We had a great time with it. Jeff has always been that type of guy though, that it's you know, it's easy to get along with him. He'll do anything I ask him to do. If I wanted to do like a you know, flippity flop type of spot, he was good to do with. Jeff was one of those guys before I even got with USWA, and I remember seeing him on TV wrestle. So meeting him and getting with him in person was great. I enjoyed that time with him, and we probably had I think we did an angle for about 6 months, so we got to work together quite a bit.
Yeah, that was a great feud. I've heard many stories about that feud, about how well that went, and it's Jeff to me seems like one of those guys that if you can't get along with Jeff, sometimes it might be your fault. And again, I know Jeff comes with his own circumstances. He believes in himself, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes, you know, maybe disagreements happen. But when it comes down to it, I think Jeff's been always great to me. I met him the very first time I met him was at a benefit. And I can't remember if it was a Charming Charles benefit or if it was another benefit that I worked. I managed Plunky and Dyron and some guys. But long story short, Jeff, my always thing is if I can make the guy laugh, I knew I could talk to him more. But at the same time, if I didn't make him laugh, sometimes I just would leave him alone because I didn't want to bug him. Wow. But I made Jeff laugh, and it was cool from then on. It was just, you know, it seemed like, okay, well, he's at least going to put up with my ignorant ways, you know.
Jeff was a good guy. He was never, you know, standoffish or anything like that. Even before I met him, he always was very approachable. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the classic feuds in the Smoky Mountain is the spot where they pull off the Rock and Roll Express are in the ring, and there's a spot where the Heavenly Bodies have a sheet, and it's a sheet over Arn Anderson. And I think Bobby Eaton's there with them, and they pull the sheet off of Arn, and Arn's standing there, and the Rock and Roll's like, look who we got. We've never liked each other ever, but we've got Arn Anderson. Well, you know who was in the ring that had just wrestled the Rock and Roll Express?
Who?
Jeff Daniels. So isn't that cool? I mean, Jeff, if you look at the only, you know, two of the guys that I really compare their resumes to, well, three, I should say, would be, you know, especially the guys that really ran through those early territories were Jeff Daniels and Tommy Heggie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Dante and Jeff have a very similar resume, and it's not something they're sitting there telling you. I can pull it up and show you. I can show you an image of who they've worked. I mean, Tommy Heggie and Jeff Daniels have a great resume. Ben Jordan as well. Ben's got a great resume. You just look at their past match history, and it's just amazing. And I just love seeing that whenever you're going down this list and be like, man, oh my gosh. And I think when we started talking to Jeff was the guy that you didn't even need to interview him. He just was telling the stories. And I think he says, well, I started out when working with Bob Sweetan, and I'm like, holy crap, man. That's how I knew that was going to be a good interview, because Jeff just was like, anytime anybody brings up somebody's name like Bob Sweetan, are you kidding me? It's going to be a good interview after that. So, but anyway.
No, man, I love Jeff. And Dominique. Dominique was good to me too.
Oh, great manager.
She took a chopping block from me, And it was actually Jeff's idea. It's like, hey, man, why don't you hit down with this chopper block?
Are you sure?
Like, are you sure? Yeah.
You must have not seen my very early arm drags. I'm kind of stiff, kid. Yeah. Anyway, well, yeah, that's awesome, man. So this is kind of leading up to really you and I starting to get to know one another. Yeah. And we're really working together. We'd worked together some here and there, but this is when we all kind of come together. And in my personal favorite time was working for NWA Saw. And one of the best moments of my wrestling time was I got to do color commentary for a Hero Killers match against, I believe it was Hammerjack and Kevin Weatherby. It could have been just the Weatherbys. I can't remember, but Hot Rod didn't make it that night. And Pearl comes to me, he was like, hey, would you like to do color commentary with Jack? I don't have anything else for you tonight. Do you want to do that? I'm like, yeah, I definitely want to do that. That was a lifelong wish of mine to be doing color commentary. And that's why I do a podcast, I guess. But anyway, that was just so fun. And I walked up to Tim. I walked up to you and Tim after that. And I would always go to you first because I felt like you had a little bit of a warmer greeting with you. And I said, man, I just called y'all's match. I hope I did you right. And you were like, oh, I'm sure you did fine. And Tim was just like, why are you talking to me? Again, not in a bad way, but it was like, kid, I don't care about your stupid commentary. Like I wondered if my match was good or we just told a story. That's my important part. But yeah, you brought up names like the Weatherbys and we brought up TJ. Obviously, you worked two of the better tag teams in that crew of Team IOU and the Weatherbys. Yeah. What I would love to hear your thoughts on both teams, actually.
See, I guess I'm kind of lucky. I've never had not a good time with anybody, so I enjoyed it. The Weatherbys were great, man. I mean, they're just two kids that want to go out and they want to have fun. They're willing to do things. That's one of the hardest things about wrestling is guys that want to just walk and talk. But these guys, hey, we want to put something into it. IOU was the same way. They wanted to do some good spots. And now they did rub Tim the wrong way. I will say this.
Oh, wow.
So they actually came up to us the first time we worked, and they started telling us the spot. And Tim goes, that's not how this works.
Oh, man.
And I think at the time, Tim had like 30 plus years in. I had 20 years. And I'm like, I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't feel disrespected. I just felt there was two guys come up and say, hey,
excited.
These are the spots we want to do. Tim did not like it.
He was not entertaining that. Yeah.
No. It was, and he literally goes, man, I'm not taking anything. And I was like, all right, I will take all of the gimmick. I'll take we got the heat, and when they did the comeback, I'll take the big bumps and all that stuff. At the end of the match, the finish was, I think I was shooting Kerry off into the ropes, and Tim had the saws that he used, and he whacked him in the back.
Oh,
and I mean, when I say he whacked him so hard. When we get to the back, I say, hey, man, let me see your back and see how bad it is. There's little saw teeth marks, like the shape of the saw, like you got the flat part, the straight part, and then it comes around to the saw, and it's like, bro, we got to put this on it before this gets infected, man. This is bad. But Tim was hot.
Yeah,
I didn't have a problem with it. So, but I enjoy working those guys, both IOU and the Weatherbys, man. They would whatever I wanted to do, they would do, and then they just had their ideas of what they want to do. So I didn't have an issue with it. But yeah, the Weatherbys were great kids, man. Them kids they wanted to go and they had fun. So.
Man, Kevin and Cody could do anything you wanted them to in the ring. They were so talented. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think Kevin really took the business seriously. Cody, I think, was so talented, he really didn't need to take it seriously. And, if he would have committed to the business like Kevin did, I could easily see them still, them being one of the great tag teams, honestly, because, and I'm not knocking other tag teams. I'm just saying they were just a great brother. You could just tell they were brothers, and they were a real tag team. And like I said, Cody could jump out of the building. Kevin could too, but Kevin also could put the A's and the B's together on the mat a little more, and then the Team IOU, like I've said this to Jared, it's one of the most original ideas of a boy and his dog, and then it kind of evolved. But at that time, it was very much a boy and his dog. And Iggy and I'd worked with Kevin Weatherby. I'd worked with Iggy. I'd worked with Kerry Awful from the start at Porter's. And then most of those guys stage a big walkout, and I'm stuck there with some other guys. But again, two of the tag teams in that area that I thought were highly underrated. I also love Plunky and Drew, as the Untouchables. But they
Plunky's my guy. Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, great tag teams. And really, I mean, if you look at those three tag teams right there alone, that's a very promising look for what Nashville, wrestling could have held. And, so I'm sure being where you and Tim at that point were the well-oiled team, and you guys were the deep in the career veterans, I'm sure you could at least respect the fact that, okay, maybe if we pass the torch tonight, it would at least go to somebody worthwhile. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem, but I didn't come up that way where I ever had a problem with passing that or doing a job. Or
right.
It's a business, and you got to look at it that way. I never felt, my ego never got into it. I remember when at one point there's a guy, Dan the Man, that was coming up, and they wanted to do some stuff with him. And I said, okay, I want to put the title on him. And this was actually in Madison. And we did a deal that said, hey, we want to put on him. I said, we're going to do this, but we're going to do this a little level up. We're going to almost do this like a pay-per-view. We're not going to have a singles match for like 4 months. And we had a big long angle that long, and it was when we had Hot Rod that was a baby face, and we turned him heel where we paid him off to attack Dan, and it culminated in one night where I put Dan over for the title. But it was like a big, huge night there. It's probably one of the biggest nights they've had there, and it just was it was a great match. If you can look that up on YouTube, the crowd was into it.
That's awesome.
But I said, hey man, let's do it like a pay-per-view. Let's build up to this. Let's not do it like a standard outlaw match, and then we're facing each other every single week. Let's build it up to this, and it made it into something.
That's very cool. Storytelling at its best right there. Yeah.
I like the young guys coming up.
Yeah. They're, lots of fun, man. If you look at, unfortunately we've lost Joe Cephas now, but if you looked at it, there was a time there where the Nashville wrestling scene not only had some amazing veterans in it, but it also had some very up and coming, promising young talent that, to me, I was kind of right in the middle because I was more of the age of the veterans, but I was closer in time in the business to the young guys. So it was I kind of crossed two there, but I also was a manager. So it wasn't like I was getting in the ring, but what allowed me to do was I got to work with a lot of those guys in some capacity, a lot of fun.
So tell us about your last match.
My last match, it was, I actually did some managing last year and once this year.
Yeah, but I mean, talking about in the ring.
In the ring.
Yeah, I know you're going to be a great manager. I know it. It's awesome.
Well, I don't know, man. It's rough. I'll tell you about that. I have to tell you. So my last match, I want to say it was Lewisburg or Shelby. No, I think it was Lewisburg.
Okay.
And it was, I honestly don't remember who, because I wrestled twice. It was a deal in the, I can't remember how it worked. I think it was Bubba Morton. I want to say it was Bubba Morton, the last match. And then we had a deal where we walked out, where we jumped on the baby faces at the end. And the funny thing was, so it was one baby face, and I can't remember who it was, but I remember Rick Reynolds punched him, and I was holding the guy, and he throws his head back, and he hits me square in the nose with his head. And I remember Rick going, oh, this ain't going to be good. Because Rick thinks I'm about to jump on the guy. I almost did. And I took a breath and I grabbed us. I said, kid, you cannot throw your head back when someone's holding you like that. Yeah. And so I calmed down. I didn't give him a receipt. He knew, and he braced for it too. He knew he had a receipt coming. Yeah. But Rick Reynolds was hilarious. He's like, oh, this ain't going to be good. But that was my last match, man. I didn't do anything since then. I was pretty much, family guy. I wanted to be home and things like that.
Yeah, that's cool. I get it. Sometimes they just happen and you didn't realize it was your last match, and it was like I could have made a bigger deal of that, but it wasn't. Yeah. I guess that's just how it is, and that's sometimes okay. I think, you seem like you're in a good mindset to where things are. You're like, okay, hey, but I do love the idea of you managing, and I know you're working, some with Kroll whenever he's not getting buildings stolen from him and stuff. But talk about, are you enjoying managing?
Man, I'm gonna tell you. So the funny thing is, last year, Kroll called me and he goes, "Hey man, what do you think about Nore Havoc coming back?" And I said, "Man, I can't get in that ring and take no bumps." And he goes, "Oh no, I don't want you to wrestle. I want you to manage." I said, "Okay, I could do that." So we did a deal. It was gonna be Cahagas, and it ended up being somebody else. He couldn't make it, and we were going against Chase Stevens.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing is, I hadn't taken a bump in years, man. I remember Chase was on the outside, and I went to throw him into the turnbuckle, getting some heat, and I gave him the office to reverse it, and I took the bump. And so later that night, I told my wife, because my daughters are so excited to see me wrestle, and I told my wife, I said, "Listen, I got to tell my daughters, I can't do this again. I did that one bump, and it about killed me, man." So managing stuff is hard.
Well, I always listened to Gary Valiant when he told me, "Kid, don't let me hit you. Don't let me hit you, because it's over once I hit you." And I understand it from two perspectives. One, the work, and two, the shoot. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're right, Gary. I don't want you to punch me, because it would be over in both ways.
I'll say this about Gary Valiant. No one sells like him. He is going to sell his butt out for you.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, but, managing, to me, I loved it. I miss it. My back is not going to allow me to do it anymore. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had a back surgery that had to shave some bone away. It's not as stable as it should be. But long story short, I miss it so much. I wasn't in the best spots when I last saw you. I was not doing good in my life. And so I had to leave, or I wouldn't have been around much longer. Let's just say that. I came back to Virginia, got my life together as much as I can, right, Jarrett? But and now I got this podcast going, and I love this podcast and stuff, because it's funny, because now Ben Jordan said it last episode. He said, "I can talk, I can do all that. I don't have to take bumps. I don't have to worry about spots, and I just got to come out somehow, try to keep the podcast entertaining." So when that goes down to it, though, part of my podcast, and I've done it on the Wolfie Show, I've done it on majority of our shows here at Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, is a thing we like to call the name game. And I just got a simple question. Mr. Nore Havoc, Mr. Eron Hatchett, would you like to play the name game?
I'd love to play the name game.
All right, we'll be right back. DJ, hit the music.
Now it's time to play the name game. Now it's time to play the name game.
All right, we are back with Eron Hatchett. We're playing the name game. And Eron, I tell you, the very first name you got to ask, it's got to be on there, is Mr. Jerry Jarrett.
Jerry Jarrett, the guy that brought me into the business, the first guy that really believed in me. I remember having my first match in Memphis. I remember going to the back and him hugging me, telling me how proud he was of me. And when I came back, I actually went down with Wolfie to TNA, and it was just good seeing him. He's always been a good proponent for Eron. He's always been someone who's always just pushed me and wished the best for me.
That's awesome. Well, you can't say Jerry without saying Jeff. So how about Jeff Jarrett?
Man, Jeff is cool. So me and Jeff and his younger brother Jason would work out. And I would mess with Jeff, because I knew Jeff was juicing. And we worked out one time, and we were working back. And I think he took like a 25-pound plate and tied it to our waist. And he took two 45-pound weights, so it's 90 pounds. And he's repping out doing some pull-ups. And I looked at his brother Jason, and I just gave him this smirk like, man, he's on something. Jeff is cool. He's pretty laid back. He's chilled. He's I don't have anything bad to say about Jeff.
And that's always a plus. If you don't have anything bad to say about it, no need to make anything up, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, I wasn't at the level he was, and maybe some people that's at that level that may have some issues with it. But no, he's always been great to me.
Yeah, I understand. Definitely. Well, the next guy is Jerry Lawler.
I think the one person, if I think into wrestling, that didn't like me, it's Jerry Lawler.
Wow, really?
I don't think Jerry Lawler liked me, and I had my suspicions. Well, one thing is, so I wasn't a giant, so I wasn't someone he could beat. So it didn't make sense. You know, he wants giants so he can beat them. But I don't think he ever liked that I called him, I just called him Jarrett, or sometimes just Lawler. But I would call Jarrett Mr. Jarrett, because I gave him that respect. He's the guy that brought me into the business.
Yeah.
He looked out for me. And so I would always just, call Lawler either Lawler or Jarrett. I didn't call him Mr. Lawler. I would call him Mr. Jarrett. In fact, I remember one night in Evansville, Indiana, man, he came out and he got on to me and I want to say it was Jamie. He was like, man, how long did you guys go? And he was just berating us. I'm like, you told us to go 12 minutes. We went 11, 13 minutes, whatever the case. So it was around 12. And I just got the feeling that he never liked me. But I will tell one funny story about him.
Please.
We were at the Louisville Gardens. And so the way Louisville is, you got the dressing rooms, the locker rooms downstairs. Yeah. And I can't remember who came to me, but I'm in the big locker room, and they said, hey, man, you got to come out and see this. And so I said, what? And I step outside, and there's Lawler and Macho Man Randy Savage having a conversation. They're across the hall from each other. And Lawler's standing there butt naked. And I go, what? And they're having this conversation, man. I said, all right. Just go back into the locker room, man. But it was hilarious.
Oh, my God.
That's a lot.
That is just, yeah, the king in all his glory, and let's just say.
Yeah, and all the king and all his majesty. But he had no shame, man. He had no shame.
It's funny. I've heard stories about Dusty Rhodes like that, too. How Dusty would have a T-shirt on and his boots or something, be walking around just halfway naked, man. I mean, yeah. Let's just say this. I don't want to see Jerry the King, Dusty Rhodes, or anybody like that naked. I never do, want to, don't have any desire for that. But let's just say King may be in a little bit what you call better shape than Dusty. And, it's just, I don't know. I don't want to see a big fat man naked. I just don't, man. I'm sorry. I mean, again, with the disclaimer saying that I don't want to see any man naked or really anybody naked at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. But you definitely want to see that. But it was pretty funny.
That is hilarious, man. Okay, so was Macho Man just no-selling it, just talking away like nothing was going on?
They're just having a regular conversation.
Wow.
And I'm like, I guess this is normal. Maybe they got that type of relationship. I don't know. But,
Jerry, I find myself not looking down, okay?
All right. How about Moondogs?
Moondog. Okay, so I will tell you at USWA, me and Larry were on the Moondogs, man. The funny thing is, he would smoke cigars. And so I would tell him, yeah, man, I smoke cigars. I didn't smoke cigars. I just wanted to fit in.
Sure.
So we would sit in the locker room, and we would smoke cigars, sweet cigars, like Swisher Sweets and Black and Mild.
Yeah.
And so I was like Clinton. I wouldn't inhale. Because I wanted to fit in with Larry. So, man, they were great. And when you're in the ring with them, it's hilarious because they were baby faces. And I remember they made the save, and they did the barking thing, the roof, roof. And it really scares you because you're like, hey, man, are they for real? And then after just being in the back with them, talking to them. But they were so good at their gimmick, man. It made you think that this was real.
Yeah. Spotty, man. Wow. I wish I could have met him. That would have been great. Yeah. They always carried that cow femur around too. I mean, it's a believable look and gimmick. And honestly, I'm glad that since there's no true original Moondog around anymore,
Right, yeah.
I'm glad nobody's really totally doing that gimmick, but that's just such a cool gimmick, always was. And I know it means so much to Memphis and the Memphis fans because, you know, the Moondogs that I know of course, was Spotty. I think it was Rex. We would see them wrestling at WWE and stuff. And
Spot. I think they had Spot.
Yeah, Spot. Yep. And, you know, to me, I think of those, but I know that they really made their name and really became what they were because of Memphis. So, yeah, so cool. And of course, Larry Latham and Wayne Ferris and that tag team and stuff. So the Blonde Bombers.
All right. We mentioned him earlier, and he's, there's probably many words been said about this guy, but just give us a few about Jamie Dundee.
Jamie Dundee, man, my best match ever was with Jamie Dundee. I think our first match, we got in the back and we hugged each other for about 5 to 7 minutes. It was that good of a match. And for whatever reason, man, when me and Jamie worked, for whatever reason, Jamie clicked with me. That I think I had my better self as far as in the ring or working with Jamie. Now, Jamie.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of take the good with the bad. And, when you be around Jamie, like I said, he's usually going 100, but when you settle down, he's a great guy. But I will tell you one time that he made Tom Burton mad. It was a match. They were on top. They were last. It was their main event, and Jamie was late. I mean, it was like 8:30 when he showed up, and so he said, "Man, I was running late, and I stopped to McDonald's and got these cheeseburgers." So Tom was upset, and Tom is a shooter, and Sean was like, "I'm gonna blow him up." Sure enough, man, he blows him up, and they get to the back, and Jamie immediately throws up all those cheeseburgers, and it just smelled like rancid Cheetos. It was probably the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life, but it was funny.
I can't imagine.
I'll tell you one other story about Jamie. I kind of hate to say this because I don't want to say anything ill as far as, you know, Jamie and things that he's done, but I have to say this story because it goes to my because I was very naive. And I remember one night he was there and he said, "Yeah, man, I was up to like 12, 1 o'clock doing bumps." And I go, "Man, where were you wrestling that you were taking bumps at 12, 1 o'clock?" And he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Eron, I was doing cocaine."
Yeah.
I could just see the face he was making too. Like, Eron. And I can't imagine Tom Burton and Jamie's voice going at each other too. It's both, you know,
deep and scraggly.
Oh man. Okay, this next one on the list. So I'm going to do a little bit of an impersonation, but please, no one out there, don't judge me on this, okay? So recently on the Wolfie D show, we had the legendary Reggie B. Fine on the show. And Reggie's another one that, you know, like Jamie's Reggie's, right? Okay. Yeah. And we're not going to tell any new stories about Reggie that haven't been told a million times, but Reggie says this. He's like, "I think a lot of this woman, but I never did like her because she only liked white boys." And that is
Miss Texas. Talking about Jackie. I already know that.
Yeah.
He's talking about Miss Texas.
Yeah.
So can I talk about Jackie?
Please, yeah. That's who I
so Jackie and I were close. She was like a big sister to me. We always rode together because she didn't drive. I can't remember the reason why. It's like she didn't want to drive. It was the thing that she didn't want to drive. Yeah. So we always rode together, man. And she would always we would stop at McDonald's before we would go to the show, and she would always get the exact same thing. She would get a Big Mac, a large coffee, and fries every single time. She never deviated from it. But when I first met her, I thought I wasn't going to like her. And I thought I couldn't be more wrong when you meet her. And she was just, she was my big sister. Okay. And I remember one time we had TV on Saturday, and it was like on Wednesday we were going to be in Evansville, and before, so we was in Louisville, we was going to Evansville, but we went to like shopping beforehand. And so this was like 1993, 94, and they didn't really have like divas back then.
Right.
But we stopped to go shopping, and she got this tight dress, and she goes, "Eron, what do you think about this dress?" I said, "Jackie, they're not going to let you wear it on TV Saturday." And again, this is before they had the divas and all this stuff.
Right.
Man, she wore it on TV that Saturday. I was like, I cannot believe they let you wear that dress. But yeah, now Jack is wonderful, man. She is definitely one of my favorite people.
Yeah, I think honestly, if you're thinking about we talked about the men's and all too often the men get brought up as a Mount Rushmore and that kind of thing. And, you bring up the Mount Rushmore of this, the Mount Rushmore of that. If you have a women's Mount Rushmore, you've already named like two of the Mount Rushmore women, honestly. Yeah. And Miss Jackie and Scary Sherry Martel. We can argue about the other two all day long. It doesn't really matter. But when it comes down to it, you got to put those two on that list because she was great then, but then she turned into even more when she got into WWF, all the stuff that she did. She was so good and so talented and just there was no joke as to why she was there. It was obvious, So
she's very humble. She is just the sweetest person in the back.
You can tell that. You can just tell that she's just a good person. So, yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, that was it wasn't a Reggie B. Fine. He wasn't on the list. It was Miss Texas. So you got it right.
When you said because why he didn't like her, I knew you were talking.
Well, he didn't say it that way exactly, but I was kind of paraphrasing what he said, let's just say. And he said she never would, you know what I'm saying. Anyway.
He was jealous. He was just jealous. Hey, Reggie was cool, man. Reggie he was a cool dude, man.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't known him long, but he calls me Jimmy Kimmel. And, what's even cooler, man, is he's coming out with a podcast soon with my buddy Gene Jackson. And I'll pat myself a little bit on the back. I actually helped put that together just a little bit. Gene took the ball. I'm excited because Gene's one of the OG podcasters. He's been doing it since they were doing it, like in 2008 and stuff. And, Reggie was like, Jimmy Kimmel, I want a podcast. I want to write a book. And I'm like, I got a guy that can do a podcast. I can't help you write a book, but I know somebody that will do a podcast with you for sure. Yeah. I'm happy to say it's going to be called Real Talk with Reggie B. Fine coming soon. Y'all look out. Be excited.
Okay.
All right. The next guy. Very cool. And Gene's awesome. He'll be great at it.
Can I say one? I'm going to say one thing.
Please.
Just a female Rushmore. There is one person I'm going to put on a female Rushmore because she was a personal favorite of mine and probably my favorite person in all of wrestling, and that's Christine Jarrett. And I gotta tell why, because everybody was wondering, what was the connection between you two? So I got to start with them because I knew her nephew. Yeah. But here's where she became my favorite person was one week I took Billy Travis somewhere, and she found out about it the next week. And I remember I came to the match, and she said, hey, you want to go put your bags down? I need to talk to you. So I put my bag down, and she takes me to this room. And so Corsica Joe and his wife used to work there, and then they would count the money. And it's like thousands of dollars just sitting on this table. And it's like 4 people in this room. And she has all these people leave the room, and it's just me and her and the money. And she lays into me. And she basically says, hey, you need to decide right now who you need to be associated with in this business because there are people that are going to bring you down.
Wow.
And it's just people that will try to talk to you as if they're better than you because they've done things but she talked to me because she cared about me and she wanted to see me succeed. And it's just like a mother or grandmother getting on to you like, hey, don't do this. And it's because I love you. I care about you. And from that day on, she became my favorite person in wrestling. She's not a wrestler. And she was always, for every match, she always, at the fairgrounds, she was there to say, hey, man, I love your match. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing.
And you know what's crazy about that? If I'm not mistaken, she took the tickets at the sports arena, right? She was the ticket taker for a while.
Well, actually, Corsica Joe's wife, I can't remember her name. She would take the tickets and somebody noticed that. Well, she greeted everybody. She basically like a greeter. She greeted everybody coming in.
Wow, it's like church or Walmart,
Exactly.
It's like church and Walmart. You're always going to have a good greeter there. So, that's funny. That's awesome. Well, if you're going to get greeted to the show, I mean, that's, to veer off a little bit, you brought it up. I'll step away from the name game. How was it working at the fairgrounds, man? How did you enjoy that?
Oh, man. The only thing I didn't like about the fairgrounds for somebody like me was the ropes because they had these old ropes that had like, hose, like water hose.
Yeah.
And so when you have to do stuff off the ropes like me, and I'm doing jumping and things like that, it made it hard. But working at the fairgrounds, man, it was for someone who grew up in Nashville, it was a dream.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And like I said earlier, my time there was really good timing and luck. That when I was with the Jarretts is when they had to deal with WWF, and they're sending all these guys down, Macho Man, The Undertaker,
Lex Luger, Big Boss Man. I mean,
Luger,
Yokozuna,
they sent Shawn Michaels down, X-Pac. I remember X-Pac. I told him a spot that Brian wanted to do. I told Brian a spot that X-Pac asked him to tell him to do. And he was like, man, I can't do this. Who you think I am, PG-13? And I thought it was hilarious.
That is funny.
So I was lucky, man, that I was there at that time. So the houses were always good.
The bleachers were out, as you say. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because I know that was how you could tell if it was going to be a really good box office is if the bleachers were out, and if the bleachers were, and not every place could, not every promotion on after that could ever put people in the bleachers all the time. So, a lot of time.
One night they had to turn people away, and they said, this is what it used to be like in the 80s. And I was like, wow.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I never got to work there. I was close, man. It was so close, but never happened. But anyway, on to the next one. And this one is, an interesting one to bring up because I do want to hear a little bit about this. And if you don't want to go into all of it, that's fine. But especially about the Scorpion, Pete Cannon.
Oh, Pete. Yeah. So Pete was Pete Cannon and Camille. Wolfie's mom and stepdad. Yeah. They were you got to have people on your side,
right?
And they were always there for me. And when I stepped away from wrestling, when I was out, they were there. I mean, every single day they were there. When you go through stuff and you got somebody that's there for you, that it just speaks volumes of their character. So Pete and Camille, man, I love them to death. And they knew me because of course, Pete knew me from wrestling, but they knew me as a little kid that would go hang out with Wolfie. So I would go to the house sometimes. Yeah. But, I can't speak enough for both of them. When I say one, I got to say the other because they both were there and they treated me like family.
Yeah. Mama D. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mama D. Yeah.
Did you ever work Pete at all?
One time, man, it was a battle royal, and I remember saying, "Hey, Pete, I'm ready to go." He goes, "All right, take this big clothesline," and I did like this big 360 clothesline for him, and he pinned me real quick, and I got out, and that was the only time I worked with him.
Gotcha. Yeah, Kroll and Rick Reynolds both had great stories about Pete for sure. So in different perspectives, but it was cool to see.
How about Dutch Mantell?
Dutch Mantell, Dirty Dutch. I got a good story with Dutch. We were up in Cincinnati, and we were in the locker room, and Dutch always had this whip, as part of his gimmick. He goes, "Hey, Eron, hold this phone book. I'm gonna show you how to crack the whip, crack it in half." And I go, "Dutch, I'm not holding this phone book." And he goes, "No, bro, I won't hit you. I won't touch it." I said, "No, Dutch, I'm not holding this phone book." And Tony goes, "I'll hold the phone book." So Tony grabs the phone book, and he's holding it, and Dutch cracks the whip and literally cracks the phone book in half. Yeah. And so everybody's impressed, and I go, "And you wanted me to hold that?" So everybody just bust out laughing. So I used to ride, and sometimes with me and Jackie, we would ride with Dutch, the three of us.
Yeah.
Another guy that was pretty laid back with me. Dutch was good to be around.
Yeah, Dutch. I got to manage Dutch a couple times, and I got to manage against Dutch once, and then I managed Dutch a second time, I guess, because he said I was worth a damn. So, but do you remember me doing the Omar gimmick at all before I did Jimmy? Okay, I didn't know if I had done that around you or not. Okay, so I'm doing that gimmick, and he looks at me. He didn't see me because I didn't always wear the gall, as they call it, the whole deal, and until it was time to go, because a lot of times it gave me a little bit of incognito, that kind of thing. And so I put all that on, and then I would go out there and I'd be a different guy. So so when it comes down to it, I put all that on and Dutch is looking at me and we're at some spot. I say spot show. We're at a spot show for Porter was just, he paid you to go to this one. We're working somewhere, maybe in Kentucky. I can't remember. And Dutch looks me up and he looks me down. He looks me up. He looks me down. He's like scratching his chin. He said, he said, kid, you're all right. You're all right. But that gimmick ain't working. And
really?
I said, yeah. And I said, what do you mean, Dutch? And he was like, you're not, it doesn't look right on you. And I said, okay, I respect that. And so that was kind of the start of the process. Now, Kroll actually made this decision and took it off of me, which actually was a heavy thing for me at the time, but it really worked. And then I managed him against Lawler in another show in Kentucky, and I actually helped him to the car, carried his bag for him, did, kind of the rookie type stuff for him. And I was still doing the Omar gimmick. The coolest thing was in the match, and I know it was a rib on me, but he iggied me probably 15 times. I'm really? Not kidding. He would get in a lockup with Lawler, Iggy, and I would jump up on the ropes, distract the ref, and they would do a little something. The two things that are the greatest things that night, though, is I end up turning heel on Dutch, and again, he and Lawler run me off. And so I took a punch from Lawler, which is the greatest punch in all of wrestling. Let's just be honest.
I'll agree that. Yeah.
And the second thing is I took a bullwhip shot from Dutch. Now, really? He didn't actually touch me with it.
Though,
he didn't even touch. He cracked it, and he said, "Now, kid, when I do this, you're going to have to run like you're a scalded dog." And I did. And I remembered the first time we worked together, he chewed somebody out who just like did a bump and laid there when he's cracking that whip. He was like, "If I had somebody with a whip on me, I would be running like I robbed a bank."
Yeah.
He's like, "Why did you just lay there?" And I was just glad it wasn't me that he was chewing out. But the second time he cracks that whip on me and I'm out of that ring like nobody's business because Lawler had knocked me out technically. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then he cracks that whip and I'm out of there. So the whip crack woke me up basically. And I run out of there, holding my head and holding my butt and everything. And that was I was like, all the stuff that, I felt like I'd earned with Porter that night. I think he paid me back in full because it wasn't much longer I worked for him and Bert. But when it came down to it, man, I was like, holy crap. And they came to me that night and they were like, are you want to manage Dutch tonight? And I'm like, yes, I'll manage Dutch. Who's he working? Jerry Lawler. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. I said, are you sure that I'm ready for this? Just being real, And they were like, oh, you'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget those 15 Iggies because if you think about it, on a regular size ring, and I'm not talking about the USWO, saw rings, the regular apron,
like a 24.
Yeah, stepping up on the apron, stepping down, stepping up. It was a bit of a task, and he's Iggying me 20 times, and it was hilarious. I know it had to be a rib because if not, I mean, there's no reason to Iggy somebody 20 times, and it was hilarious. Yeah, and it's fine because it was hilarious. But that match, I paid it off because I took a punch from Lawler, and he slaps his ribs, and he didn't even, he barely touched me. It was just so beautiful. And anyway, sorry, I've took over your show.
No. Man, Dutch is great.
Yeah. The next one on the list, I'm gonna jump off this. The next one on the list I got to bring up is Reno Riggins.
Reno. Yeah, man. My first pair of boots I bought from Reno.
Wow.
Because I used to do the shooter gimmick, and I had the kick pads and the shooter boots because it was just easy for me to jump around. But now Reno goes back till 1993, 1992, I think, when I first met Reno.
Yeah.
And I remember one time with USWA, I saw he was doing this it was a tattoo gimmick. It was a Japanese gimmick, and he was working, I want to say it was Tatanka they sent down.
Okay.
And I saw him do a spot that I stole and I used to this day, and it was one of the greatest spots to me at the time I hadn't seen before. So I used to steal stuff from Reno. It's like, man, when you see something good, you got to steal it. So I just steal gimmicks from Reno. Yeah, Reno's, man. And he's real easy to get along with, and he's great in the back. He has a lot of knowledge of what's going on, and he's been everywhere.
Yeah, literally everywhere. Worked everyone. Yep. Ric Flair, he did the bill to Ric Flair. Yeah, so anyway, yeah. And so Reno's awesome, man. I've learned a lot from Reno, and we're gonna have him on the show soon. So can't wait to talk to him. He's a great interview and a great guy. Yeah. The next one is on the list here, and we did talk about Tim a lot during talking about the hero killers. But the one guy we didn't really bring up as much, and I would love to hear a little bit more, is about Devon Day.
Devon Day, yeah. Man, I love Devon to death. So Devon, like I said, when I did the hero killers, I called him first draft choice. He was the guy that I wanted with me. He was going to be the right-hand man. I remember one time he was doing a promo, and I was on the other side of the wall, and it was someone talking. I can't remember who it was, and he just goes, "Enough." And I remember I perked up and started listening, and he did one of the greatest promo I've heard him done. So Devon, and when Devon passed, man, it was hurtful, I would say. Yeah. And especially, for a while because I got out of wrestling. I remember I hadn't seen Devon probably for about 3 years, and of all places, I was in Santa Claus, Indiana at Holiday World, and I hear somebody scream my name around, and I turn around, and it's Devon. And when I say, man, we hugged each other just because we hadn't seen each other so long. But it hurt me when Devon passed away. And one thing I will say Devon did, and I love this, was something was getting advertised for a match somewhere out of state, and I saw it, and I called Tim Renesto and said, "Hey man, why did it say the hero killers were supposed to be there?" He goes, "Hey man, that's Devon." So he had took the hero killers and he was branching it out. And I said, "You know what? I'm cool with that." So he had to take the hero killers away from this area and start moving around. But yeah, that's my guy.
Made a franchise of it. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. How about this guy? When we had him on the podcast, he needed us to say nothing. Hot Rod Biggs.
Hot Rod Biggs. We ain't jerking the curtain. We still in the show. Yeah. Man, Hot Rod is one of those. I love his promos. And when he became an announcer, he always put over Nore. Hot Rod is, man, I tell you what, Hot Rod used to do my taxes.
Yeah.
So that's how much I trusted Hot Rod.
Amen. He did mine too. Yeah.
So. Yeah. And he did a good job.
He did. So, I got a great refund that year, so I was happy.
I know. So, yeah, man, Rod is great, man. I love Rod, and I love, how he's overcome some things in his life. So he's great to be around. I will say one time I thought he was going to kill me. It was a 3-way match with me, him, and Slacker J, and Slacker J had me down for the pin. And I just happened to look up, and Hot Rod is coming off of the top rope on top of both of us. And it was like it was in slow motion, and my body just goes, "This is going to hurt." And it did. Oh, I was like, listen, let me roll out. Y'all do something for a minute. But yeah, Hot Rod's my guy too.
He's great. Hot Rod's so good. And honestly, I feel like, he's a great wrestler. I'm not knocking him for that. But I feel like it had managers. I feel like he could have gone to the top. And I mean, seriously, to the top as a manager. And I don't mean it in a perspective of him not being a wrestler, because he was an awesome wrestler, super great at the ultra violent stuff. I mean, he really could do a lot of great stuff. But I could have just seen him being the mouthpiece for some of the best of all time. He would have been really good at that,
He had a great promo, great interview. I loved his tagline.
Oh, yeah. Loved his tagline, the whistle, the stop sign, the tennis racket, whatever. It's funny you brought up Chris Kearns earlier as far as one of your earlier matches there, and we're actually having Chris on the next episode. So I'm excited about that. So we'll have some fun.
You bring it up to Chris that he had one of my top 3 wrestling matches, and it was my first match.
I will. I definitely will. It's on the notepad already. So.
All right. How about another former guest of the show, Hammerjack?
Hammerjack, Kenny. Let me tell you. So Kenny, again, one of my good friends. Love Kenny. The only thing, and I mess with him all the time when I tell him this. I say, "Hey man, working you sometimes like working a dead mule." He don't want to go where you want him to go. Man, I'll grab Kenny by the hand at the back of the head, and I'll try to take him somewhere, and he's fighting me. I'm like, "Kenny, why are you fighting me like this?" Yeah, but man, Kenny's my buddy, man. Kenny's my buddy. I love seeing Kenny. We don't see each other enough, I think. So yeah, he's actually, when you work him, he's not that bad. It's just every once in a while he gets well, I don't go over that. I want to go over that way. You got to come on, Kenny, come this way. This is easy. But yeah. Kenny's my buddy.
Yeah, it's funny when I have certain moments of, when you win someone over, and I don't want to say I like won all these people over as far as people that actually start to give you the time of day. And some of them were like you and were nice from the start. Others never gave me the time of day, and it's okay. I'm fine with that. But Kenny, one night, it was after Saw's show, and he said, "Hey, Jimmy, you want to come to my house? We're throwing a little party." I said, "Yes, I will." And I knew that was a bit of an olive branch. And then when I get there and we're drinking some beverages, and he brings out some of the white lightning, let's just say, and it was in a big mason jar, and we're kind of passing it around, and he sees the way that I'm drinking it, and he's like, and he sees then about an hour or 2 hours later that I'm not slobbering all over myself. And I think that gave him an extra respect for me. And he doesn't understand that is in my Appalachian blood. And so it was not a big deal for me to have to put down some of that. And a good portion of it was gone, and he respected me for it, I think. So we'll just go with that. I won't say I did the Kurt Hennig gurgle and swallow, but I was drinking it pretty good. But anyway, that was funny.
He's pretty easy to get along with, man. I've never seen anybody just have any problems with Kenny.
Yeah, he's definitely not. I mean, he's honestly verbally smacked me around a few times, and not anything. Oh yeah, it was about the way I was living my life, man. He was calling me out on that. I wrecked my car. I'd some things that, like I said, my life was not going in a good spot, and he would pick me up. I was down. I didn't have a car. He would pick me up to bring me to Saw to work, and I would be there. And because of him or Jeremiah Plunkett, I'll always give them credit, and they both have big places in my heart because of it. Yeah. But he would constantly, say to me like, "Man, you got to outgrow that stuff, and you got to grow up. You got to outgrow that." And I'll be like, "How do you do it? How do you grow up?" And he's like, "You just do it." And I knew what he meant. It wasn't like I just took his advice and ran with it per se, but the verbal smackdowns were good for me, and I needed them, and I'll always hold him in high regard. He was one of the first real guests we've had on the show, as far as, somebody from my past, from that scene. So it was good to have him on, and very appreciated of him. And again, he may not even remember telling me those things, but I'll remember him saying it, that kind of stuff.
Well, Kenny, just on his work side, Kenny's got to work some really good people. So he's got to do things and go around. Oh yeah,
yeah. He grew up kind of rough too. He had Baltimore, which everybody knows Baltimore is not a place to trifle with, So yeah. Anyway,
all right, this guy, we owe a lot to this guy. He's if we ever get anybody else on payroll, it's going to be this guy, Shane Morton.
If we ever get us on payroll, let's just say that. Anyway, just kidding.
So Shane, let me tell you, Shane, I love Shane. About a year or so ago, because he has these reunions that he does. I couldn't make one, and he called me up and said, "Hey, man, I want to let you know you won this award that everybody voted for, and it was the Heat Magnet Award. I have it in my office now, and it's voted on someone who can get true heat, and it was voted on by the guys, and Shane set that up. And, man, let me tell you, Shane, the funny thing about Shane, I've never stiffed anybody like in the ring. I'm pretty easy and light to work with. But there's a belt they have that has like an eagle on the top. Yeah. And I would hit him with that belt, and every single time I would stiff him with it. And he was like, "Man, you got to stop hitting me." I'm so sorry, buddy. I am so sorry. But, and Shane, when I came back, Shane was the one to say, "Hey, man, I want you to come here. I want you to be my champion. I want you to do this." Shane, and even Bubba was cool too. But Shane is the one that I've worked a lot for, and for whatever reason, man, I think if I was to, and just to kind of talk about Bubba, I think if I was to like pat myself on the back for anything, because Bubba would get sometimes to where he didn't want to work, but whenever he worked me, he brought it all out.
That's awesome.
So we had some really good matches. But yeah, Shane was the guy that really, when I came back in, other than Kroll, that wanted to see me do some things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you brought him up, so let's finish with the one I wanted to finish with, and that is Mr. Kroll. Go ahead.
Mr. Kroll. So he is, we got to be friends when we both were in the Jarrett camp. We're still good friends to this day. When it was him, Jim Dotson, and Leon Downs that I went to the Jarretts and said, "Hey man, I think these guys are ready. You need to do something with them." And I remember taking Kroll around, like he wanted to get some more experience. I took him around the outlaw shows to get some more experience. Man, he moves for a big guy. And we used to do this spot where I was a heel, he was a baby face, and he's a very large man. I don't think people realize how large he is, or how well he moves.
Yeah.
We do a spot where he would shoot me off the ropes, and I would do a baseball slide under him, and when he turned around, he would get up great, and I would body slam him. And then I would do a celebration thing. I'd pump my chest, and I'd go back to him, and he would do like this big gorilla press slam on me. But he would get up so light, you wouldn't, it's just like me picking up a 200-pounder. He would get up that light. So to be as large as he is, and to get up that easily that he would get up for me, and he always made me look good. He always looked out for me. He always wanted me to be his champion. I would say, Kroll, I don't want to be a champion because I don't want to be here too late. But he would always put me over. So, yeah, Kroll is, like I said, he was the best man at my wedding. He makes a joke and he goes, "Oh, you just had me there to take pictures." Like, no, man. Of all people, I wanted you here.
Yeah.
So, I love Timmy to death. I would say, if I was to say my best friends in wrestling, I was going to be Kroll. And then, of course, we mentioned Wolfie earlier. Wolfie and I have always been tight since the early 90s. But, yeah, Kroll, like I said, best friend at my wedding, best friend at my wedding. He's always been there for me. He's always lived out for both Eron and Nore.
Yeah. I mean, you were tight with Wolfie unless Frank and Jeff were gassing you up, right?
Let me tell you. So,
I'm just kidding.
Brian Christopher said the next week, he goes, "How are you guys fighting last week and you're best friends again this week?" It's like, it's over with.
He's told that story too. That's so funny. Yeah. How y'all hate each other and love each other the next week.
Yeah. Weird, man. I mean, when you're friends, you get over that stuff. It was gone and we were, back mid-buddies.
Right. Sometimes if you're really friends, that's what you need. Sometimes you need to blow off some steam every once in a while, and that's what happens, But
Wolfie didn't, he never he wasn't upset with me. I wasn't upset with him.
Right.
So guys can't handle it now. They can't handle, it's a different era. In my day, if you got into a fight, you got into a fight and it was over with. Guys that you have a fear and it's done with, and guys aren't like that now. They take it too far.
Yeah, that's true, man. You take it too serious and CM Punk yourself out and you have a job, So anyway, that's about all the new stuff we'll be talking about today, kids. So that is it for the name game, Eron Hatchett. You did it, man. You passed with flying colors. I knew you would. So after the name game, we always wrap things up just before we're saying our goodbyes. We wrap things up with one question from Jarrett, the Plastic Sheik. Go ahead, Jarrett.
Okay.
So I know you mentioned earlier that you feel like it's one of your best matches ever was with Jamie. Would you consider that your favorite match ever?
I think I would, man. It just because for whatever reason it clicked. Me and Jamie we just clicked together. I mean, it's the only other time I would say I enjoy. The only other person I just really enjoy working is Chris Michaels. Chris Michaels is probably one of the most underrated workers around. And we've had a series of matches that I love doing with Chris. Again, Chris is one of those that's better than me, but he makes you look good. I wish Chris, as much as success as he could possibly have, he should have had more and where he should have been. Yeah. So I would say, my best match is definitely with Jamie. Some of my favorite matches are with Chris Michaels.
Yeah. I'll quote Chase Stevens in saying that I've tried to have a bad match with Chris and couldn't do it. So that says a lot, and, that's just huge, man. I love Chris. Chris was actually, Plunky was our very first guest. We've had other guests, Magnum, TA, Greg Gagne, crazy names for the kind of podcast we've been doing. But, Chris was one of our first that really went in depth. I wanted to do as much of a deep dive on his career as we did with yours today, and so we could have gone on hours more as we could with you. But I just, the one thing I want to wrap up with is most wrestlers during their career, they dabble with things that make them fly high. You, however, have chosen a different way to fly high. Why don't you let everybody know what you're doing now, especially since COVID?
Yeah, man, I am a private pilot, so I fly planes. I think I wake up in the morning, think about flying. I go to bed at night, think about flying. That's awesome. Some people like to fish, and it's a relaxing form for me. It's getting up in the air and just going on what we call a cross-country flight. It's challenging.
It's a trip.
Yeah, it is, man. You lose more brain power than you sometimes tired.
Right.
Just from the amount of brain power. But I love flying. I'm an airplane guy.
I won't consider it similar to editing a podcast, but sometimes I would say they're kind of similar, because brain tired is definitely, something there. But so I guess, is that something you always wanted to do and you just pulled the trigger, or did you just say, hey, I'm going to do this?
I've always been into flying, and about 4 years ago or so, my wife, who's always been encouraging, and she's like, hey, just do it. Why don't you just do it? So once I got the green light, man, it was a go from there.
Yeah, wifey says it's okay. It's time to do it, right?
It's time to do it,
Yeah. So where have you flown to? Just being nosy.
No. So you'll do local flights, So I'll fly a Cessna 172. I may fly. Usually you go in, you rate it by not necessarily in miles for how long you're flying. I'll fly for an hour, hour and a half. Come awesome. Back. So you go, I'll do mostly some stuff up to Kentucky, and then I'll go south. I hadn't done a whole lot of going east, going into the mountains, only because things like that you want to be, I'm certified to fly in it, but you want to be proficient. We use that word a lot to flying as being proficient, and flying in the mountains is a little bit different because the elevation higher and the way the engine works is different.
Yeah, I can tell you, growing up in the mountains like Jarrett and I did, we're from, like I said, the Appalachian part of Virginia, in southwestern part of Virginia. We've heard of several, I think at least two I know of airplane crashes in that area. And, it was in those mountains, man, and they must not be anything to play with as far as flying, because it was, I remember it happening very young. When we were a kid, we heard about one, and they're, just crazy to think about. But anyway, I don't want to put that in a negative light. You know what I'm saying?
No. But man, I love flying. That is definitely my jam.
That is awesome, dude. So are you going to use maybe a Garvin name now? I think Jimmy Garvin and Ronnie Garvin both are pilots. So you could be
Garvin.
Yeah, Ronnie and Jimmy are both Nore Garvin, maybe, or Eron.
And I love Ronnie Garvin, man. That was the man behind his own. I didn't know he was a pilot. I didn't know that at all.
Well, it's not as well known as the Jimmy Garvin, but Ronnie is as well. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay. Wolfie and I interviewed him, and we had George Weingroff and him on together, which was a trip, man. So Speaking of George, I want to bring it up because did you ever know him at all, or did you work with him much?
Oh, absolutely. I've worked with George several times. I actually knew George from amateur wrestling.
I was going to say,
he would help coach at Franklin. And so I knew him, and he knew me from amateur wrestling when I got into pro wrestling.
Yeah.
So, I do George well.
And he's the real deal too, right?
Yeah, he's the real deal.
Would you, let's just say putting you against him in a magical world where you're both in your prime, who are you picking?
Yeah. I'm going to pick George. For one thing, he's bigger and heavier than me. And the era that he learned to shoot wrestle is more physical probably than the way I did. And plus, he was a better mat wrestler than I was. I was a takedown guy.
Gotcha.
I was the one, my senior year, I set the record for takedowns. So
shock and awe kind of thing.
Yeah. And if I had my flaw was I wasn't as good on the mat, and he could wrestle on the mat.
Yeah. He went to Japan and wrestled that Pancrase style in his 40s.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't even like walking up the steps sometimes, man. And he's doing that in his 40s. You know what I mean? So
I don't know how guys do it now. I don't know how at our age the guys that are still doing it. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, it's surprising, but to get to know George just from the podcast stuff, man, has been a blessing because, dude, he just knows so much. He knows where the body. I always joke that Kroll's one of the guys that knows where the bodies are buried. I know George knows where they're buried too, but sometimes maybe it's because he put them there, but I don't know. But he's just got such a great story where he was legally blind, and I mean, he wins the.
He looks on one side of the head. When you talk to him, he's on one side of the head.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I tell you who else is Tony Falk knows where the bodies are too.
Oh, but he ain't talking about it though. That's the thing. He'll tell you in secrecy, but he's not. I got him on one podcast, and it took probably 6 months to get him on the phone. And he's just a kayfaber, man. Love him to death. I think the world of Tony. But he's great. Great interview. I want to have him on this show too. I've got another show I'm putting together called Stories from Across the Street, where it's just going to be like long form story. It's like one big long story. I want to get Tony on that because I know he could do about 1 million of those. So,
I think Tony Falk is that type of guy, like in Hollywood, they've got the, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yes. Yes.
You could do that with Tony Falk in wrestling.
But it's almost not 6. It's almost like 2 or 3. It's that's one. Yeah. Yeah. It's you're exactly right. You're exactly almost like Wolfie's like 6 degrees, Yeah, but Tony's like 1 degree, it's just funny. But Eron, man, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on here, man. I tell you, it's been one from the start. I wanted you on one of my podcasts and we didn't work one out, but I knew as soon as the word was, hey, I'm doing it. So as soon as I got the rights to put you on my show, I was taking it. So I had to wait till the licensing agreement ran out on the Wolfie D podcast, and then I took you on mine because I was like,
second. I had a blast, man.
Yeah, man. And we always ask this before we wrap things up. Do you have anybody you'd like to say shout outs to, thank yous? I know we've talked about everybody under the sun, but anybody that maybe you didn't talk about you'd like to say a shout out to or
I'm going to thank you and Jarrett. I'm going to thank Wolfie. Of course, my wife and my 2 girls, Erin and Kylie, who are great. Always been 2 good kids. Man, it's cool when you have 2 good kids, and I have 2 good kids.
It's awesome.
Of course, I'm going to shout out to my boy Kroll. I'm going to always shout out to him and Tony Falk. Tony Falk has also been a good proponent for me.
Yeah. That old Nore.
That's exactly what he said. And then, of course, Tim Renesto. Wherever Tim is, I can't seem to find him. But if I could find Tim Renesto, I need to shout out to him.
Yes, you find him and then tell him to come on my podcast. How's that? Yeah. Now, I don't think he will listen to you, but at the same time,
you never know, man. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can just imagine the stories that man has, and I think he'd be one of the great podcasts we've ever had. So for sure, maybe we'll make that happen one day before we're old and gray, but we'll see. But today we had Mr. Nore Havoc, Eron Hatchett, and I know we've said both names regularly, but it's because you literally had a double life, basically. You were baby and a heel, and they were both important. But just thank you, man. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you being on, and I can't, we'll have to have a part 2 coming up in the future, man. So you come on back. So,
man, I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you, Eron. Jared, you got anything?
Come on, man.
Yeah,
just appreciate your time, man.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Well, you have a good evening. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Eron, and we'll talk soon, man.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
All right, y'all. Thanks again, Eron. We'll be right back to wrap things up with the Plastic Sheik on Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Hey everyone, this is Shane from Insane Shane's World. I release wrestling figures of enhancement talent, mid-card wrestlers, and wrestlers that you never thought would have a figure available. So if you are interested in adding a really cool and rare figure to your collection, then don't hesitate to contact me at shamtheman73@gmail.com. That's SHAM theman73@gmail.com. You can also join my Facebook group. Just search Insane Shane's World.
This is the big picture, Michael Jablonski. Don't forget to tune in every week to Jablonski's Pissed Off on the Mike Jablonski's Pissed Off YouTube channel.
The Buffalo in the sport, he's gonna tell you all about it. He doesn't care what you think, you're gonna hear all about it. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. Mike Jablonski, he's so pissed off. He's pissed off.
Oh man, Sheik, what did I tell you? What did I tell you? Man, Eron's cool, right?
Hey man, cool as the other side of the pillow. I feel like we keep getting these interviews. They're just as good as the one before, man. It's just always so good to hear it, and I thought learned some stuff, and good to get a retrospect on his career, man.
Yeah, and he really did have two careers there. He started out this like up and coming baby face with the very true background in amateur wrestling, and then became the pro wrestler chosen by the Jarretts. I mean, he really was the guy, and then takes a break and comes back a vicious villain. And, I love the switch from Eron to Nore, and I got to know him in Nashville, and man, he was always really cool. He was one of those guys, the locker room leader. He was a little more quiet though, but you could always count on his opinion coming from a correct place, and very cool guy. Like I said, this was one of our most excited. I mean, I think the people were as far as the people I've talked to, I think they were very excited to hear him on the show, to hear his story. Even the ones that probably already know most of his story, to actually hear it on the podcast, But, one thing I want to say, the Ben Jordan episode from last week's doing awesome. Very excited about that. Showing some good promise on YouTube as well. So thank you all for listening to YouTube and keeping us going on there. Just keep subscribing, keep liking, keep following, keep commenting, just anything you can do. We got our Sheik shorts on there. We got all kinds of fun stuff we're dropping all the time. So just keep an eye on our YouTube. It's definitely one of the best places you can see and hear our stuff. But as always, thank you for downloading the show. If you listen through it to the apps, we're on all of them. So whatever you want to listen to it on, just please listen to it on whatever you want to. But thank you all so much just for listening. And, the big thing I really enjoy is I'm just thinking about all these guys we've had now, like Ben and Eron now. And then next up, we got a really cool show coming up with Chris Kern. He's a former tag team partner of the Bruise Brothers with Hot Rod Biggs, but he had his own thing going, man. He actually was the third member of PG-13 for a little while. He's done a lot of fun stuff. I'm excited to have him on. I don't know Chris. I maybe have met him a couple times. I don't exactly remember, but I tell you what, I'm really happy, we're going to get to hear his story. And any guy, any friend, anybody that's respected by Hot Rod Biggs, hey, he's cool to me,
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he'll be a good one, and we'll have fun with that. But once again, I just want to say thank you all so much. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us, and all the we do this because you listen, right? I mean, we were doing this before you listened, and it just wasn't as fun as now that everybody's listening. So
more the merrier.
Yeah. More the merrier. You're welcome on at any time. If you all have any questions or anybody you want to see on the show, feel free to shoot us a message. Feel free to shoot us an email at gmbmpw@gmail.com. Also, you can hit our DMs on all of the social media platforms. It's at gmbmpw. One other thing, also, if you have a business, so like if you're listening to this show, okay, and you own a business or you have something, an upcoming event you'd like to promote or something to that effect, or something you want to sell, chances are your demographic is also listening to this show. So the cool thing about it is we have advertising opportunities starting from the ground up. You can go from 30-second commercials to whole 2-minute clips, whatever you want. We can put it on there. We have different rates available covering all that. We can actually do 2 shows too. You can actually run your advertisement on this show and the Wolfie D podcast if you'd like. So either way, if you have something you'd like to promote, sell, or you have a business that you'd like to get more people to hear about, let us know. Again, at GMBMPW, we're always taking and open to new advertisers. We do want to thank our current advertiser, Steve BOWTIE Bryant. Go buy his cards. Honestly, I can't believe those sets still are around, man. And, you know, the cool thing is you can get them right now, $49.99 for a set from 1993. Has Reno Riggins in it, has Ricky Morton, PG-13, Ben Jordan, the Wild Boys, Dante Mephisto, Rick Reynolds as the medic. There's so many great names in there. You definitely want to get that. It also has the Bruise Brothers with Chris Kern and Hot Rod Biggs. So once again, if you're interested in not only advertising with us, but also getting that Unbeatables trading card set, give us a contact. We'll put you in touch with the man if you are interested. So anyway, I'm done shilling for advertisers. I'm done promoting. I just want to say thank you, Sheik, as always, for being my partner in this. And I'm glad we can get these wrestlers on and just talk pro wrestling, man.
Yeah, me too, man. It's always a great time, and I feel like you enjoy more every week we do one. So
Absolutely. We do want to say a shout out to Sheik Adnan Al-Casey. He did pass away. Of course, we had Steve Rosenthal and Greg Gagne on, and we told them about your name, the Plastic Sheik. And I don't know, I think you and I just have an affinity for the Sheiks, right? Your name, my old gimmick, and Iron Sheik and Sheik Adnan. It's just sad stuff. I did text back with Boris Zukov. We're going to have him hopefully on a podcast in the future. I don't know if it'll be this one or the Live and in Color, maybe both. We'll see how it goes, but maybe we can get you an action figure too, Sheik. That might be nice.
Hey, man. Boris Zukov, that's a big one.
Yeah, he's great. Great guy. Great guy. Very nice guy. We've been texting back and forth. That's awesome. So anyway, keep up, keep listening, keep following. We always appreciate it. Thank you all so much. So for the Plastic Sheik, Jarrett Street, for our guest, Eron Nore Havoc Hatchett, I'm Jimmy Street, and this has been Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling.
Don't forget,
Shooter.
That's good. Shooter.
With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life. This has been a James Rock Street production.